Which one?
Step Brothers one.
Oh, the Step Brothers one. Yeah, I got some cool shit here. I got that's Hector Lombard's glove.
Awesome.
Got Richie.
I actually had a Hector Lombard glove. 2007, he just won some title and I fought on the same card as him and he just signed it for me.
Yeah, Miles gave me that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he was rampaging back down here, he was an animal.
Well, without further ado, the long-awaited, the highly requested Kym Robinson.
Hello, it's good to be here finally.
It is. It's good to fucking have you. It's so weird because I've always obviously known that you was it the Firm or Ringworks? The Firm you used to train out of?
At Wollonga, the Firm.
The Firm.
And then we migrated in 2012 to McLaren Vale, and that was Ringworks.
Yeah.
And then and then I had my own gym after Trent stopped coaching there, and stopped like doing that sort of thing at the gym. And then we went to Darkside when I shut my gym down.
Yeah.
And that's when I was just down the road from you.
It's incredible because it's like you were. Well, I don't know. You probably wouldn't call yourself it, but I would say that you are one of the pioneers in South Australia.
I'm
in
an
MMA.
old man.
You're an old man.
Yeah. Well, I think I was the first South Australian to fight MMA.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. I believe so. There's Trail and Karim, and then I had a couple of guys like I reckon Trent fought pretty early. He fought in 2004, like him and I were Trent Debut, that is. And then I reckon, yeah, it was around. That was the earlier guys like that were doing it from South Australia because you just didn't have anyone. Like kickboxing was really big. Like
Muay Thai used to be the thing in Australia.
Massively in South Australia. We had a lot of Muay Thai guys, and the scene was incredible. Like the Muay Thai scene. Like I think it peaked when probably Miles and Steve retired. Steve Bean and Miles Simpson retired. Like and it's still there, definitely still there, but it's not.
It's not where it was at all, and you can tell like going to a Knees of Fury event back in the day might as well have been going to like a fucking Bellator show. Or
the talent they had on.
It was insane.
I think South Australians took for granted the talent that Ethan and that were bringing over in those shows. And even some of the independent ones that like...
you get Israel Adesanya and shit fighting.
Yeah, I know. And even like a lot of the Flinders guys and a lot of the other guys like, like Sam Harvey's guys and all that and Benetti's and stuff like that, all these guys, you were having elite level fighters that were fighting overseas. I mean, I remember while I was training... I remember running hills at Kangarilla. Miles was going to China to fight with Israel, and not to fight the country Israel, but Israel the fighter. And then Ben was going to Iran, and then Adam Collett and Shannon Franklin were like, Shannon was training for a boxing competition, and Adam was training for a wrestling, high level wrestling competition. I was training for an MMA title, and we're just training like decent levels, and we're just training our asses off. And we had a lot of that sort of talent that was at a high level professionally. And now kickboxing it's definitely there, but it's not anywhere near it was.
Nah, no, it's not. And I remember like you had your Slawinskis and your like just all Gary Williams and all of these people.
Charles August, all those guys, yeah.
And I think Slawinski's actually still fighting. I think he still had a fight. He had a fight recently.
Did he? Oh,
yeah. I think he's still doing the thing, but like...
Flinders, I hope he doesn't.
Flinders and like Alan Wong back in the day used to be a fucking guru, and it was just such a big scene.
I think also the location of where the Flinders Muay Thai was
central.
It was so central. That's right, because the wrestling academy was also there as well. So there was like this little community of combat sports. But even going back to with the Muay Thai scene, this is the funny thing. Like back then, it was really hard to find people to grapple with. So as an MMA fighter, you'd be doing rounds with kickboxers, but you had to improvise. You had to do bag work on the ground. You train with the wrestlers and things like that. You train with like a 60. You're a 93 kilogram fighter or a heavyweight fighter. I'd be doing stuff with like a 61 kilogram wrestler, but then you're doing your sparring with kickboxers.
It wasn't MMA training.
No, but then jiu-jitsu sort of just popped and it became this big thing. And then the kickboxers sort of like people that were doing kickboxing and boxercise and that, they started doing jiu-jitsu and all this other stuff. And even for MMA fighters, it's sort of like now I feel they're still like wandering Ronins from gym to gym trying to like put it all together. But back then, the kickboxers and the wrestlers, man, they were just all the time. They would help you, you'd help them, that sort of thing. And I feel that a lot of the jiu-jitsu guys don't want to speak the language. Not all. This is a stereotype. Sorry, guys, I'm stereotyping. I know, but a lot of them don't want to learn the language of MMA. You know what I mean? So you might be mounted on a guy, and he would just sit here and do this, or he would suck for your legs, that sort of thing. And you're supposed to be MMA grappling, Whereas the kickboxers, you'd have kickboxers like Slawinski, for example, when he adapted to MMA, or B-Man Steve, or Miles, and that, when they were fighting Muay Thai, you do rounds with them, and they'll give a double leg on you, you know? They'll move around, they'll play around, they'll be outside their comfort zone, or you'll be doing rounds. I'll be doing rounds with, Stan, the wrestling coach from...
I really want to get Stan
Oh,
on.
get Stan on, that'd be lovely.
I remember once I was at, sorry for cutting
No,
off
you're
your
good,
story,
mate, you're
but
good.
I remember, I'll never forget the day I was at M16.
Yep.
And I can't remember, well, I think I went in after the wrestling class. I think it might have been a jiu-jitsu class. And Stan was there, and I'd never met him before.
Yep.
And he doesn't even say hello to me. He just starts telling me about how the Russians used to inject fucking their athletes with, like, ape DNA. And, like...
I was at Darkside, right, coaching. And I was just coaching, doing whatever. And then... this guy comes in, I knew the guy, Adam the guy was, he comes in just wearing flip-flops and, you know, shorts and that, and Stan tells him to get out thinking he's a homeless guy, goes all staunch, goes, get out, sort of thing. And then the guy goes, I'm here to train, and then Stan just drops his demeanour, hey, how are you? Starts talking about wrestling. But that's what I said with Stan, like, Stan would be in his like late 40s and 50s at the time, and I was fighting an MMA fight, and you know, it was really hard to find sparring partners, people were time poor with work or whatever else. I was training for a fight. Stan, you know, I was doing some wrestling stuff with Stan. He'd just put boxing gloves on and he'd do like 10 rounds of boxing with me. Stan's lovely, bless him. He's not a very good boxer, right? But he would still do it, you know? Yeah. And he'd want to go hard with you, and he'd clinch with you, and he would go hard. And he's just a guy that's multiple shoulder injuries and, you know, back injuries, and he'd just do it. And that's the attitude. Like, you know, like even now I tease him when I message him. He's just come off of the, you know, neck surgery and shoulder injuries, and he's like 64, 65, let's say. He's like, oh, he wants to get back in shape so him and I can do wrestling rounds together. And, you know, I mean, that's that mentality, you know, and that's very hard to find now.
You have, like, if you could have fast forwarded, like, 20 years and see where all of, like, the people you were training are at now, you'd fucking, like, even seeing what Miles is doing now, you'd be so fucking proud of him.
I think it's good because, like, at that time, like, it's funny because one of my friends tried working out a long time ago, sort of like a tree. Like, you'd train with some of the jiu-jitsu guys, like, it was, you know, you'd go down and you train with like SABJJ guys, and then there's like a guy, Sean his name was, and he had at Theberton back in the late 90s, and you'd go down there and just do some rounds because it was the only place you could do where you'd do a certain type of rolling, right? So I remember, you know, you go down there, and I remember going down there in 2001, right? And Sakuraba just busted Henzo Gracie's arm. So everyone's doing reverse Kimuras. Like, it was a thing. It was like, or I remember even before that, going down there in 1998 when Volod Ismail had done a clock choke to Hoist Gracie when Hoist Gracie did a jiu-jitsu comeback. And everyone was practicing that move because that was the trending move. And there was no social media. There was no whatever else. It was just like, you know, videotapes and magazines. But people were learning those moves off the videotapes and magazines, but they were viral moves. So, you know, doing the reverse Kimura was a trendy thing for a little while, or doing that clock choke was a trendy thing for a little while. And now it's sort of like, it's like a blink. Like, so now with social media, like Craig Jones will do something or Nicky Rod will do something in a match, and it's something amazing in that. And then there's like a seminar structure based on it. There's like a Instagram rules based on it. You got some dude that runs a YouTube channel doing a breakdown, and he's, you know, they're trying to turn it into some, you know, coming up with conceptualize some algorithm based on Craig's intuition and body motion.
And then people learn how to counter it.
Yeah,
exactly.
And then it becomes this and this and this. But then it becomes doctrine, if you know what I mean. And then someone just does something basic like a straight arm lock, you know, a jiu-jitsu katami or something like that. And then it's like, oh, okay, that's amazing. It's crazy how cyclic it all is and how trend-based it all is. And, you know, it's funny because you just think back and it's like there's that saying, you know, by, what's his name? I'll think of it anyway. Where history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. You know what I mean? Like, so there's a lot of cadences where things seem very similar over time, and it becomes repetitious. So yeah.
Yeah, and it would have been, so like you said before, it would have been really fucking hard to get people to convince people to roll with you back in the day because
no one wanted to.
They would have been like, "What the fuck is this shit?"
Yeah, pretty much. It was. I remember going to a martial arts gym. My brother and I would, you know, go to martial arts gym and challenge instructors because of the Gracie challenge. You thought that's what you did back in the 90s. And you'd go there and you'd ask them about, you know, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or catch wrestling and stuff like that. And then you'd have a bloated belly black belt in karate or taekwondo. Goes, oh, you just elbow them in the back of the head when they just shoot in on you, mate. You just, you know, give them a knee to the face. It's like that easy sort of thing. And that was the simple answer you'd get. And so you'd go there and you say, oh, can we just do some, you know, anti-grappling stuff or counter wrestling sort of things because, you know, you're interested. And this is, you know, the world where you'd have like an Emin Boztep there, so you straight blast the jiu-jitsu guy if he tries to shoot on you, you know, that sort of thing. And the people at that time, this is the funny thing, right? The people at that time were telling you that jiu-jitsu's bullshit, wrestling's bullshit, grappling's bullshit, right? And then suddenly, when there was money involved, there's money in them hills, these guys become Machado jiu-jitsu instructors, you know? They're mixing up with their kickboxing and their shoot fighting and all this other sort of stuff, their stick fighting and all that sort of thing. They're mixing up that curriculum, and then they're going into jiu-jitsu because it's monetarily viable. But 5 years beforehand, 10 years beforehand, they were talking absolute shit about grappling. You know, grappling would never work. You know, do grappling in a street fight, bro, mate. Like, you know, some guy body and that sort of thing. It's like, well, yeah, that's great. But then there are also intimate moments where it's really relevant too, you know. But now I feel it's gone the other way around. Now you've got jiu-jitsu guys that are sitting on their butt scooting or doing donkey guard or something like that, and they're going, oh, I'll be able to beat a boxer. And they're not practicing takedowns, you know. They're not practicing range control, you know what I mean?
There's so many high-level, extremely high-level black belts in jiu-jitsu who have no takedown. Like,
you don't necessarily need to. Even in wrestling, right? You don't need...
Like, playing guard probably wasn't as big as it was in the 90s and early 2000s as it is now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, because I think the animal that jiu-jitsu was in the 90s, let's say, and the 80s, it was Vale Tudo. It was Lucha Libre versus Jiu-Jitsu, you know, and then you had like a rivalry which was based on the gi versus no gi. And so in many ways you could argue that Lucha Libre's won because everyone's practicing top control. They're practicing no gi grappling, right? So is it Jiu-Jitsu as it was taught by the Gracies, as it was taught by Carlson Gracie and Helio Gracie, you know? Is it Jiu-Jitsu? Because the Lucha Libre guys, you know, and the Horse Vale Tudo guys and all that sort of shoot bite and catch wrestling guys, they were trying to say that, no, the gi's, you know, detrimental. You know, we should also practice with strikes. We'd also practice top control first and foot locks. I mean, there was a time when Sambo, catch wrestling and the Lucha Libre and all that sort of stuff, that was the places where you went to do the foot locks and the ankle locks and that. And then all the jiu-jitsu guys, you went on the forums back in the day, man, jiu-jitsu guys would say, never do footlocks, never attack the legs because you're giving up position. You're sacrificing good position because it's position before submission. That was the doctrine. That was the dogma that you would always hear. And, you know, it was all positional based. It was like, you know, side control, mount. That's the thing. Guard is somewhere you control an aggressive opponent. And you're trying to control their arms and stop from strikes. And then you all set up that sort of philosophy, right? And then somewhere down the line, it went from position to get submission to losing the positional dominance and control of an opponent, and it went to sacrificing position recklessly to hit a footlock.
I think John Danaher probably was the biggest.
Yeah, but you watch a Craig Jones or a Gordon Roney, but you watch Craig, when he does it, there is control.
Yeah.
He's controlling that person. It's magnificent. But a lot of these guys are sacrificing control. So even if you understand the philosophy that is, you know, control and position, so position doesn't necessarily mean point-based positions, i.e. side control, mount, whatever. It's positional control. So controlling the person's upper body as much as you are controlling that lower limb. A lot of these guys are jumping, not even controlling the lower limb. They're jumping to fishing for a foot lock or ankle lock. They're giving up top position, and then they're not even controlling the hip. They're not even controlling the body because they're trying to imitate something that someone like a Craig is doing. And they're like, you know, but they're missing, you know, the forest of the trees. They're missing the details that he's controlling their body. That he's fidgeting, he's adjusting.
You're not just going to pass Greg and fucking mount him in like full mount.
No, but they're going for the cherry on the cake rather than actually making a cake.
Yeah,
and that's the dangerous thing. And that's where, if you watch, say, an Oleg Toktarov or a Ken Shamrock, when they were setting up footlocks back in the day, they would be in a position. They might be in a clinch. They'll jump down, hook, and they'll go for that foot, and they're taking a man down, controlling, and then fishing for that footlock. And but they're not doing it recklessly. They're not doing it because those are the days when you get kicked in the head. You know, you get head butted, you get elbowed, and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of control. And when, I mean, I don't do no-gi grappling, so full disclosure, that's not my philosophy. My
you don't?
No, I don't do it. I don't do it. So I'm talking about, as an MMA person, I'm talking about a person who now doesn't even do MMA, who's focused more on self-defense and combat, you know, like fighting, that sort of fighting. My perspective is you should always train as if you are training for absolute violence. That way it makes you honest. So even if you are training...
What do you mean by like... What I mean... are you saying the self-defense? Are you talking more like Krav Maga, like that kind?
No, not the corporate stuff. I mean like philosophically. Like say philosophically, so if you're doing a combat sport or a martial art, wrestling, fencing, boxing, whatever, jiu-jitsu, I feel you would get better at your sport, at your craft, at your trade, if you think to yourself that maybe you might have to use this to protect yourself and your family, right? So that's the fundamentals, all right? That's the principle of combat sports. Self-defense, right? Protect yourself. Because what happens if you are in a grappling match or if you are in a boxing match or whatever, and the dude comes at you hot? You know, he loses self-control and he's going reckless and all that. You need to know how to protect yourself, okay, just in case. But also you might have to do a self-defense situation. And then that teaches a certain degree of control. That teaches you how to control the person's body, that controls your own mind, controls them. And then that way you can break it all down and you can go back to whatever the rules of the sport is. Because, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, once again, I don't follow grappling competition that much anymore. But, like, the rules, so grappling is like MMA. It's this weird conglomerate of sports that are clumped together. But there's a big difference between ONE FC and Bellator and the UFC if you're a fighter.
Yeah.
If you're a fan, it's like, that's all MMA. You know what I mean? Whereas in grappling, like a lot of these guys are expected to compete in all these different types of grappling organizations, and there's very nuanced rules.
Different rule sets.
Rule set, yeah. So high-level fans can understand it and appreciate it, but the athletes have to make all these adjustments, and it changes their game plans. And if you think about if wrestling, when they do that to wrestling every so often, like with, you know, how many points they can score, and then before the round ends, right? So, and it changes all the time, and that really does change how you compete, and that changes how you prepare for a competition. But if you understand the fundamentals of combat sports, i.e. self-defense first, right? And self-control, above all else, self-control, that is a huge factor that I think is deficit for a lot of people that are going at maybe at the lower level, not necessarily the higher level. Like, say, getting in there and getting emotional and screaming and jumping up and down, then talking about honor and being humble. How is that honorable, jumping up and down and screaming and doing, you know, some celebratory Fortnite dance over the corpse of your vanquished opponent that you just played a sport with, or saying you're humble when all you're talking about is you playing a sport, right? Mm-hmm. And you see a lot of these younger guys that are doing it now, and I mean, they did in the past, don't get me wrong, but now I think it's a social media dominated thing.
Oh, it's Conor McGregor definitely opened the floodgates to that.
Yeah. You had a Charles Sonnen back in the day, he did it with tongue in cheek. And then you got a Conor McGregor who does it personally, yeah. And he doesn't have any self-control. He's reckless. But what we're learning that those people are rewarded for that bad behavior and that grossness. And most people understand it's gross, it's cringe or whatever, but it's sort of gross. But what I'm getting at with the other stuff, with the, you know, the positional stuff, is there's no self-control. Yeah. Because what happens is you got people in training now who are rolling with someone, and then they're yanking on, you know, a heel hook, a knee bar
with a white belt.
Yeah, they don't have to.
Yeah,
they don't have to do that. Practice control. Practice dominating the control. Same with sparring. Like, you know, if you're moving around with a guy and he's throwing the jab, and you can control a guy for a round with a jab, a feathery jab, man, you know what I mean? That's good for a fight. Now, let's get in. I'm going to knock my sparring partner out. Bring me another one next. When was that ever good?
That's the interesting thing that you just brought up. So back in the day, I imagine you obviously knew a lot less about CTE and the fucking...
No.
Like,
everyone
we use all pretty...
pugilistic dementia, it was called back then. Everyone was well aware. You were well aware because you had, like, say, take 1982, for example, in boxing. You had a lot of like Mung Dok Kim died in the ring, and like, you know, Ray Mancini, his whole entire mindset changed as a fighter. Emil Griffith in the 60s and all these fighters were killing fighters in the ring.
Yeah.
From weight cuts and then the brain leading. You had Jerry McCullough, all these sort of fighters. People are well aware of, a combat athlete is well aware of that sort of long-term damage. And it was, yeah, like I said, it was called pugilistic dementia back then. The science may be a little bit different, where it's including, say, powerlifting now and other things, but NFL players, rugby players, there's heaps of people that we were well aware that were getting this sort of thing. And the sparring culture, I think that is something that sort of changes, because you have a Mike Tyson who will pay guys, you know, $100 a round, whatever, when $100 is a lot of money, or even $1,000 or whatever. And they would go really, really hard because that was what they were doing to finish off for the thing. But just because Floyd Mayweather does it for his own entertainment when he brings these guys in and they do that, so that does not mean that's normal. Like, you watch a lot of, if for real fight fans, if they watch, say, boxing, for example, if they're watching, say, a Frank Bruno preparing for an opponent and he brings in a sparring partner, right? That might be a journeyman guy, that might be in the top 50, let's say, and he'll do rounds with him. And you watch him controlling the guy, working, that guy's giving him feedback, That guy's talking to him and his coach. They're working with him, etc. There's a really good miniature documentary of Jeremy Williams getting kicked out of Lennox Lewis's training camp when he was fighting Evander Holyfield for the first time. And you see the culture of the professionalism, except for Jeremy Williams is a bit of a jerk at that, which is why he gets kicked out. But it's control. They're hitting each other, but they're not fighting each other. And when I was brought in as a sparring partner for Jamie Tahuna when he was fighting the UFC, it was, you didn't go 100%. You worked on control. It was like, you let off and then you work things. He might be wanting to work a specific thing. Like he might want to throw a left hook, right? He was, for one of the fights, he was fighting Ryan Jimmo, who was a really good kicker. So I had to try to set up spin kicks, different ways to throw spin kicks, throw different types of kicks. And Jamie would try to put me on my back, or he'd try to set up left hooks and all that. So I understood what he was doing. And so the drive to training, we would talk to each other. I said, I'm going to really try to nail you with this, or he'd try to do this or whatever. His coaches would say, look, I want you to really go after him today, that sort of thing. But by going after him, they meant give him pace, tempo, and pressure.
Pressure.
Not 100%.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Not power, just pressure.
Because he's paying me $1,000 a week to be there as his training partner and his sparring partner. So it's not about me, it's about him. He's the one who's at the fight, not me. So I'm going in there and I'm just doing the job, and I'll say to him, what I have to do, what do you want to work on this, if we're doing like wrestling drills, like my single leg, double leg, we do that for an hour, single leg, double leg, that sort of thing. So it's lots of repetitions, a lot of fundamental stuff, but the main thing you're working on is the distance pressure. Let's say I'm moving with him or whatever, and he's practicing his movement, his upper body movement, and do I feel small? Do I feel like he's shutting me down before we even touch each other? Is he cutting me off the ring, okay? Is he trapping me? And then if I throw that jab, if he slips, okay? If I throw that jab, is he slipping? If I throw a kick and he pulls back, they're the little things we're working on. Those are the things that win you fights at a higher level. Mm-hmm. But these amateurs that are coming through now, and I was someone who was coaching people a bit more. I don't do it anymore. But they don't want to listen. A lot of guys don't want to listen. That's the truth. They'll tell you. Because what happens is I feel that there's a culture coming through with the fight community now, and I can say this as someone who's more on the outside of it now than on the inside of it. There's a culture coming through in the fight community where people don't want to be told truths. They want to hear what will satiate their ego or satisfy themselves. And then what will happen is these people will retire injured and underwhelmed by their career or whatever else, and they'll fall short of their ambitions and desires, and then they'll go, oh yeah, that was right. And then they're going to be just someone like myself that's going to go, oh, you should have done this, But you learn, and that's the wisdom that you have from experience. But I feel the reason why we get a lot of older fighters that don't coach as much anymore, because I used to go, why are these old fighters not coaching anymore? They got all this knowledge now. Because no one fucking wants to listen to them. Because it's like, you had your time, grandpa, whatever. I can get on Instagram and I can do 1,000 kicks, right? At 44 years of age, after doing a long day of physical labor.
That fucking baffles me out.
But why can I do that? Why can I do that?
Just appropriate training.
But what am I doing or not doing? Okay, I'm not fighting anymore, right? But why can I do that? And then you got some 21, 23, 24, 25-year-old that wants to do all this other stuff, and they're not doing the fundamentals. Why is not many people shadowboxing? Why not shadowboxing rounds anymore? But they want to go and
everyone just wants to get in and spar.
Because the easiest thing to do, and I did this myself, and then, I did stupid stuff when I was training. I'd put on oxygen mask, I'd run up and down Wollonga Hill, I'd do hundreds of plyometric jumps and all that. You'd have boxing coaches say, you've got to run the kilometers, you got to do 10Ks of running before this. You know what? Get good at fighting. Get good at, be energy efficient, be smart, understand the craft, be refined, be a craftsman first, be an athlete second. Because the easiest thing to do is to work out. The hardest thing to do is to work it out. And most people want to work out because me putting on montage music and flipping tires and doing weights and fucking doing Rocky IV training, that's actually easier than doing Rocky III training. Because Rocky III training is footwork, rhythm, cadence, timing, and that shit's fucking hard.
All the technique,
yeah, but more than technique is timing. Okay, you try to coach someone how to be like how to flow on it. Say you want to do a wrestling type, right? Just a 2-on-1, right? And you want to show them how to do it, and then they want to yank and pull. They want to be strong and pull. But then you feel the good guys. They're like that. They're just boom, boom, and you're gone. Boom, 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 gone. You watch a really good wrestler, and you feel a really good wrestler, and it's different. But they want to yank and pull. Now, what happens when they get in there against an Ivan Drago? You know what I mean? Or a Clubber Lang. Like someone who's strong and driven, and that wants to destroy you. You can't overpower them. You're dealing with a force of nature. Now, what do you do with the force of nature? You surf it. You don't beat waves, you ride them. They don't want to learn how to ride it. They don't want to learn how to time it. They want to bash everything and be the strongest person in the room. That's great. That manifests the ego. That's the Superman complex, right? But teaching that is freaking hard, because there needs a degree of receptiveness, and there needs to be the malleability of the person. And there's all these outside influences from social media to all these strength and conditioning, all these other coaches, right? You got one person, let's say one person's an amateur fighter, right? Keyword is an amateur fighter, so they should be learning the craft first. They want to be a professional athlete with no pay. And they've got all these people telling them what they need to do. They've got all these, they're watching UFC fighters, watching what they're doing, all this sort of stuff. Now, they're just an amateur fighter. They're supposed to be learning the fundamentals of the basics. What's the fundamentals of the basics? Good form, good technique, all that sort of stuff. But it's so hard to teach that. It's so hard to get that through people's heads. So what they do is they want to do the fitness stuff, they want to do the conditioning stuff. Are they performing at that high level? You know what I mean? Are they able to do the rounds? Are they able to do the stuff? Are they not injury? You know what I mean? It's like one of those things where the intuition leads them down a certain path because of impulses and things like that. But the reality is if you do less sometimes, you're better off. That's awesome.
Oh, fuck. More for that.
It's raining.
It is a fucking, and like you said a while ago, with the confidence, like fighting brings you such a confidence and like a composure that when you do train correctly, you do get this confidence in yourself. And it's funny watching people that have never been to a fight gym how erratic they can be, but they never know who they're being erratic to. Yep. Like imagine the poor fucking soul who tries to just in a road rage just fucking slams his brakes on and gets out his car, and then you're in the fucking car behind him. Yeah. It's like that cunt has no fucking...
Naked masturbating to your...
Yeah. It's like he has no idea how fucking bad his day could be.
But I think also that comes down to it. And that's one thing, as a young man, you want to test yourself, you want to prove yourself, you do stupid things, and you want to challenge, martial artists to fights when you're 15 or whatever, because you think that's what... because you think that's what you got to do, right? And that's... That it's the same as like, when you are sparring, right? And you're young, and someone escalates, and you escalate, and then it becomes an ego spar, right? You do that when you're young, right? But then you kind of realize, all right, some guy's going hard, and then if you slip and hit him with that left hook, or you put him on his back, and you do little things like that, it's an opportunity for you to control here, but to control them. And controlling them isn't overpowering them and bashing them, it's controlling them. And it's being a man and not a beast. And that's the hardest thing to learn, and that takes time, right? That's experience.
Do you miss it?
The fighting?
Do you miss the fight?
I miss being in that shape. And I miss doing that level of training. I miss the competition. I miss the community. I couldn't do it. I don't know if I could do all the bullshit now that they're making fighters do all that sort of stuff. I like the good old days where I'd rather fight in the shed against a dude, and then him and I high five each other, and not to have all the bullshit that goes into it now. And I get it. We live in that world. We live in the world where everything is what it is. But I do miss that. Yeah, I definitely do miss that.
And the camaraderie you have with your boys leading up to a camp's probably fun.
Yeah, that's good as well. I like it. I miss I miss getting a phone call from a promoter, right? Hey, I need you to fight this guy in a couple of weeks' time or whatever. And then he will go, it'll be on MSN Messenger or something like that. And he'll go, oh, hey, Kym, this is Maddie or something like that, keen to fight. This is the agreement, 3 by 5 minute rounds where you and him are chatting to each other, the NRAs. And then he'll be transparent. I'm going to pay you, $500 or whatever else. And then, this and this, to get all those details. And then you and the guy that you're fighting are talking to each other, yeah, going, well, what are you up to? Oh, playing Battlefield 42, do you want to drop on? I miss that. And I miss going to the weigh-in and seeing your guy and going, hey, man, how you going? Talking to him and all that and just hanging out. I miss the teasing sort of thing, but lighthearted sort of thing. I miss being in the hotel with your guy and he's down the hallway and you're going, like that sort of thing, and whatever else like that. And then getting on the bus and you're sitting next to your opponent, or he's sitting over there and you're talking to each other. And then you get to the weigh-in or whatever else and he's giving you eyes and you're like, try not to laugh, whatever. And then you're getting in the ring and then he's going to try to take your head off. And then halfway during the fight, you said, you missed me.
Yeah.
Or you're teasing him or whatever else. And he's trying to get you and you just comes in, you spin for the arm bob and you're right, yeah, good. Hug, high five, eat food afterwards.
Yeah.
I miss that. I don't think that is necessarily the culture now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, everyone likes to pretend they're really angry at each other now.
It's
they make up things in their head.
Who for? For cuckolds that don't do it. Fighting has become pornography, right? It is pornographic violence for people that never will, never could, and never want to fight. So they think there's a certain personality trait and type, and then the fighters are perpetuating that myth. So what they're doing is they're doing all this performance art because I guarantee you half the time some of the fighters are just,
they're boys, they're friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're saying, let's do it because we're going to sell more. Why the frick do we have to sell? What is the indictment on fight fans if that's the shit you have to do?
It's days of our lives for straight white males.
It truly is.
It is.
And that's the indictment on the fans, that they need, because I feel that the internet now is dominated by little boys like 4chan crowd and and Roblox warriors and stuff like that. Like I feel that's sort of like that culture is what's feeding social media now, and that's what's feeding the zeitgeist as such, and it's infecting into fighting, and it's like, but why? Like, I want to watch a fight. I want to see guys do their best. If they do take it personally, that's fine. That's human nature, right? But
there is some circumstances where people do have genuine hate, genuine problem with each other, though. But generally, they do shake hands after the fight. They always do.
Yeah.
They might not like each other, but they just spent 25 minutes fucking trying to kill each other. And
Ken Shamrock versus Don Fry. You know what I mean? They give us a good fight. There's a genuine rivalry and disdain for each other. But then that moment when there's that handshake and that mutual respect, that's awesome. You know what I mean? But but now it's manufactured. It's now people are like getting a matchup with someone, and they want to hate him
immediately.
Like why? It's not. He didn't kill Apollo Creed. It's okay. Relax. It's just some other guy who's agreed to play a sport with you, and if it wasn't for him, you wouldn't be able to play the sport. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't get it. Like, it's like, for me, okay, maybe my perspective was skewed because I looked at fighting not as the end game. I looked at it as training for, self-defense bullshit, whatever. For being, like, that was my goal. Playing the sport was like glorified sparring, if you know what I mean? So I think to myself, all right, if I can get in there and I can control a grown man that's a professional athlete that wants to beat me, that trains and all that, and if I can, take him to the ground and make him say uncle without doing any real damage to him, then I am able to control myself and others in a street fight, or in multiple opponent scenario, right? That was my goal. And that was the whole philosophy. That's probably why I didn't do as well as I should have done, or maybe that's why I didn't do as well as I perhaps could have done in my career, because I didn't think of it as whatever. I didn't want to play the sport at that high level. That wasn't in my heart. I wanted to do riding and other things, that sort of thing. That was my fault. Maybe that was my problem, right? And that's my perspective. But for other people, I see it sometimes, and I feel there's a disingenuousness and there's a lack of control. Like you'll have people that have, like tattoos, and they'll talk about honor and they'll talk about valor and they'll use all these words and stuff like that. And then they'll like lose all control because they want to match. Like, they'll like they've just won cross lotto. And I see that they're copying the professionals, the high level guys, but that visceral reaction and that, to me, that's unprofessional. You know what I mean? And I know a lot of guys do it, and a lot of guys are a lot better than me at it, and they're a lot more accomplished than me at it. But that's my personal take on it. I don't want to see that screaming, jumping down, celebration.
It's like stoicism. There's something in stoicism as well.
Didn't you train to win?
Yeah.
Like, didn't you get in there training to win?
Why are you surprised?
Yeah, exactly. Why are you shocked? But now we've got a culture where, like the UFC will have the commentators acting like Chuck Liddell on cocaine, going every time there's a knockout. Like, who's that for? Is that a Hago face for, fight fans? Is that what it is? Like, you know what I mean? Is that like because people are so autistic now that they don't know how to react, that they need to know how to react? Like, why is it unusual now to watch a fight and then, be in a pub or whatever, or be with friends, and there's a good thing and to go, cool, good, awesome. But now it's like, yeah, they want to. Why is this emotional outburst so normal now? I don't get it. Like, it's so...
Generally, it would be mine because I've slapped a heap of fucking money on someone.
Yeah. Like I said, you won cross lotto, But that's what I mean. Like, that's the culture now. And that's fine if that's what people want. And I'm having no problem with that. But that's bleeding into the fighters. And so you get those... now, full disclosure, I have chucked plenty of temper tantrums in training. And, regretfully so. Like, because you're so tightly wound. Like, I've broken my hand in a temper tantrum during fight camp. I was sparring and I hit a guy in the head and I broke my hand, so I punched the wall again and broke it again because I'm an idiot. So I've done it, so I understand it, right? But it doesn't help you. It does not help you, because what it does is it's not fair on your training partners, because these are guys who are helping you out and helping you because you're playing a sport. You're being very selfish. They're helping you, right? That some of these guys are coming out of their way, leaving their family and leaving their work to come and help you prepare for a fight. And then if you just jump up and down and act like an idiot, like I have done in the past, definitely, you look like a dickbag. Like, that's not fair. These guys are helping you, But now it's been flipped. It's like, oh, I've got a fight coming up. And it's like, it's the most important thing in the world. You know, I'm curing cancer with this match, and I'm going to, you know, cause peace in the Middle East with this fight. But that's the attitude now. And it's like, dude, you're just playing a sport. You know what I mean? You're not even paying for your mortgage with it. You know what I mean? And I think that attitude is sometimes a little bit toxic, if you will. And that seems to be so normal now that I don't think it's sustainable, to be honest.
Do you still actively watch MMA?
I do. I watch a lot of older stuff, but I will. I do watch it every now and then. But I won't watch it live sometimes. Like I watched the UFC.
Did you watch Pereira on Sunday?
I've only seen highlights of that fight.
Oh mate, that fourth round was you'd know better than anyone when you're watching someone that's just so fucking dialed in. That he spent 3 rounds downloading fucking all that knowledge, and in the fourth round, it was actually a clinic. He reached that flow. I don't know if there is actually a flow state that people talk about, if it's real or not.
His timing, his intuition and timing, yeah.
Mate, he wasn't even fucking moving. He was standing right in front of him in Khalil's range, and he was just like the slightest adjustments, knee, fucking lean back a half an inch.
And it's sort of like Anderson in his prime, you know.
That's exactly what it was.
And that is someone who is patient, and they don't force things. And that's sort of like it's living Daoism sort of thing. It's like a physical manifestation of philosophy, in the sense that they're not bashing, they're not grinding, they're not raw with what they're doing. And so it's almost counterintuitive, because it's like that. You said stoicism, but it's almost like that calm mariner. You know, the ocean is violent and ferocious and all that, and he's just calm. You know, he knows he's got to move the rudder. You know, he's got to adjust the sails. That's because what good does panicking? What good does anger? What does all that stuff? What good is all of that emotional, impulsiveness? What does that help him in that moment? It doesn't help him with survival. It doesn't help him with victory. But for some reason, it's like if you are in that situation, and you know, like life or death situation, your family's in the cabin even, to add the stakes to it, and you've got like the most frightening perfect storm type waves, you're going, that doesn't help, you know. It tires you out. It panics everyone. But these guys, like that's what I mean. And so that getting to that level and that composure and that mindset and that mentality, that is beautiful. That's a perfect thing. And with him, it's funny because you watch. You know, I'm sure you said it too. You watch him doing some mitt work, right? Or on pad work.
It looks so not productive sometimes.
No. But here's the fun thing, right? But why does it look like it's not right?
Yeah.
But he's the benchmark. This is the thing I find fascinating with technique, right? You will get some guy.
I know exactly what you're saying. His technique hitting pads is so peculiar.
But what does that tell you about technique itself? Technique is something that some guys did and everyone said it's right. This is orthodoxy, right? So you watch, why is technique specific to, why does everyone say you've got to box a certain way, you've got to grapple a certain way, you know, you've got to kickbox? Why is that orthodoxy absolute and correct? So you get all these little, you know, these fight virgins, if you will, that'll say, my trainer said that you shouldn't do this, you know, or that's wrong, he's terrible, you know, whatever. And yet he's doing it.
You have to find the style that's the perfect example.
But sorry to interrupt. But because technique is subservient to timing and all these other things and cadences and things like that, and footwork as well, especially at that level. You watch a George Foreman doing things, and the people go, "Oh, he's doing this and doing that." Well, I mean, look, he fought the best in 2 generations of highly competitive boxing in the 70s and the 90s, and he did it right. Just because you're a trainer, just because some guy that might hold mitts for you, just because you have watched a certain type of fighter did certain things, doesn't mean that he's wrong. He's doing it right. He's doing it right for him. He's doing it right for that moment, because timing, intuition, all these sorts of things, they're more important than technique. Because it's like if you made a sword out of clay, for example, you could have the most perfect looking sword ever out. But so the technique of the shape of the sword and all that is great and all that, but still just made of clay, right? Then you could get a blacksmith in and he can temper it out of the best steel and just fold it so many times it's immaculate. But then you give it to a swordsman that doesn't know how to use it or doesn't have the will to use it, this is still just a sword, you know, it's a hunk of metal, right? So sometimes that's what technique is. Technique absent of all of these other elements doesn't matter. You know what I mean? But people are so fixated on technique, and this is what we go back to what we're talking about with the progress of jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. They're so that they'll watch a high-level grappler. They'll watch, like, say, Gordon Ryan, for example, do something really awesome in a competition, and they want to imitate that technique. but they're imitating that technique absent of that moment. They're imitating that technique absent of context and absent of the environment, the geography, and the opponent. And so what they're doing is they're imitating it, and they want to do it and duplicate it in a moment of rolling or playing around with their friend. And then while they're practicing that technique and they want to imitate that technique, they're missing all of these other things that they could be working on, whereas that technique is only an option. And that's the trouble. And that's the same thing with good fight technique. Whereas someone like Pereira, he's got that timing and he understands his own body and he understands mechanics and kinetic linkage and all that sort of stuff. And that's why he hits a certain way. That's why he does this.
He must also just have some ungodly power, because when he hits people with that left hand, he's not following through that. Like, he's not throwing it in a way that he should get the reaction that he's getting from him. It's just insane. It's like just unorthodox fighters. Also, it's impossible to train for them. Like the most in-person experience I've ever had with someone who has such a strange technique style is Jack Spacey.
Yeah.
Jack Spacey has such a fucking peculiar style.
Yep.
He doesn't even bring back his punches immediately. He lets his hands hang out there a little bit. So when you're punching back, you're hitting his fucking arm.
Yeah.
Like just little things like that where I was like, it's so peculiar.
Do you know, I think he has, like, using both Spacey brothers, but Jack in particular, is there's no hesitancy.
No fear.
It's not, I would say that there would be fear, not in the sense of like he's scared, but I'd say there'd be fear in the sense that he respects that he can get hit. He respects he can get kicked. He's obviously feel that. There's no hesitancy. And so what happens is there's the trepidation. So what happens is, you know, when you practice, and this is a really important thing in hard training, you know what, like you say, if I say, let's do a jab, left hook, right? And then halfway through the sequence, you go, and you correct yourself. Why do you do that?
Yeah, you know, hesitating.
You're training for a bad habit. So jab, I didn't throw it right. Okay, keep going. You know, that is more important than duplicating exactly what I showed you or what you're supposed to do, right? So someone like him, he doesn't have that hesitancy. He just goes boom, boom, timing's there. And then the guy will throw a jab, boom, cracks. Doesn't hesitate. And a boxer, the Chinese boxer Zhang, right? He's the same thing, right? You watch him and how he throws his punch. He doesn't pull it back. He doesn't tense up. He just throws the punch. There's no hesitancy. And it's perfect timing in the sense that he just lets it go. He goes from point A to point B. So if his hand's here, he throws that punch from there, right? And a lot of people, what happens is, and this is something that I do sometimes when I do my bag work, you're always told you got to keep your hands up, right? So sometimes you want to bring it up and then throw the punch. But I can just throw it from there. Why do I have to throw it from up here? Like, you know what I mean? And so what happens is people become programmed to doctrines and to dogma and that. And so when you get unorthodox fighters, they're free of that bullshit, if you will, and they're free of that conditioning where they just throw the punch. You just got to, that has to hit that, you know, or that, you know. That's really simple.
And if your head movement's good enough and your timing's good enough and you can throw from like if you don't have to have your hands up, it's so fucking hard. It's so much harder to see a punch coming from someone's chest or someone's hip than it is fucking when you just square on hands up here.
Well, yeah, because your periphery's gone, right? Yeah. And people will watch Mike Tyson, and that's great for Mike Tyson, and he trains that diligently, and he's built for that, and he's
still the best to ever do it.
And
in
he
that style.
Was coached by the man who basically invented the peekaboo style. So he's learned from a Floyd Patterson's experience and a Jose Torres's experience, and you know all these guys. He's learned from all that generations of perfecting the peekaboo, and then he came into an era when the fighters were long and lean, and they're all copying the Muhammad Ali style of jab and throw that, and so it was picture perfect for him. So but that looks great and it's great, you know, it's awesome. But the trouble is, a lot of these guys are forgetting that it's his legs, his footwork.
Yeah, it's all in his feet.
Exactly, it's all in his feet.
If people who've never trained before just sit there and just try and bounce up and down on your knee, on your feet for for a minute, your thighs will be fucking toasted.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like it's not, and you can tell in Mike Tyson's legs. Like when he was a small heavyweight, but his fucking legs would have been the size of my torso. Like massive, and that's how he generated all that power. People think punching power comes from your arms.
Biceps,
it's like it's all in your legs, and if you got a wide shoulder, if you got a wide back, that also helps.
Yeah, and core, core and ass too. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Does it absolutely fucking hurt your soul that the him and like Jake Paul kind of thing?
I don't really care, to be honest. Like, I mean,
because you obviously have a pretty deep affinity for boxing.
I do. I watched a lot of boxing. More as a boxing fan, and I used to write like little boxing short stories and all this sort of stuff when I was younger, and so I do like boxing. I love MMA obviously more, but boxing I kind of like am more of a fan of, especially of certain periods of boxing history. I understand that's how people have to make money now. Like it's social media driven. It's like, old school people would have complained about when television took over boxing, when it went from the local halls and it went from that and it went to television, right? And then when it went from free-to-air television, where they'd have the advertising and all that, to cable television and pay-per-views, there's always going to be a change in the technological medium to get something on. So, streaming, and then to whatever we have now with Netflix doing it. And it's got to be a show, because most of the people that are paying the money and most of the fans are there because of Jake Paul's, I mean, put it this way, right? People will talk to me just randomly, like if I go to a work site or if I'm just out in the wild doing whatever else, about Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, more than they would against Pereira, or they would against Tyson Fury or whatever else. They're more
it's a casual fan.
It's a casual fan thing, and that's what it does. And so I can't fault Mike Tyson for doing that. I mean, even more so than him with his Roy Jones Jr. exhibition match. So, and I think he's still, like, to quote Rocky from Rocky 6, he's still got a lot of junk in the basement, He probably does, especially now he's getting cleaner and he wants to do that. He probably still has that in him. And
I've seen him hit fucking watching him hit pads, even though they probably take, like, the best 3 minutes out of an hour training session. It is fantastic. He is still fucking fantastic.
But the trouble is with it, right, and that's great, but I want to, you want to see him chasing someone, because him coming after, like, even in his prime, it would take him more than a round sometimes to catch a mover. So you'd have a lot of guys that are sticking and moving or trying to do whatever. So it would take him a while to break him down. It wasn't always him, like in his highlight reels, knocking people out. So he'd have to break them down with his footwork and all that stuff. That's what I'm more curious about, because Jake Paul is an athletic guy. He's a professional boxer. Like, he is more of a professional boxer than most professional boxers are, because he can train more than most professional boxers can.
He can train. It's just indisposable income.
Yeah, most guys were doing what you're doing, right? they're working in a business, they're managing people, and they've got a family and all that, and then they've got to train outside of that. That's what most professional boxers are doing, even at a higher level, at the like in the journeyman level and that. So the guys that like Mike Tyson should be making a comeback, let's say he's 43, not 53 or whatever, that he's making his comeback against, that's what they would be doing. So Jake Paul's more of a credible opponent as far as his training, but people have this disparaging mindset. He's just a YouTuber. Well, yeah, okay, that's great, but what does that mean? Like, that's the world we live in now. Oh, you're just a podcaster.
Yeah.
Like, the some of your bits. I get that with the writing. Oh, you're just a fighter. What would you know?
You love writing.
I write. Yeah, that was more my passion, I would say. Yeah.
Just quickly, we'll get on to the writing, because that's a big reason of why I messaged you.
Yeah.
But did you corner Bihan for his fight against Israel?
Yes.
What a fucking tough show. He did. Yeah. Apparently he did pretty fucking well, though.
He did. Well, because it was, I remember, I actually have the notes. I'd write out notes, like game plan notes, if I was helping someone out.
It's like, we're fucked.
No, but it wasn't. See, the thing with Israel, right, at that time, he was flashy, he had really good timing and all that. So Steve is like, I guess he's a workman as such, right? He works really hard. Not like, people don't understand how fucking hard he trained. He's not naturally athletic. He's sort of like a Chuck Wepner type of personality, in the sense that, like, it'd be hard to teach him footwork. He had hip problems. You couldn't get him to kick very high, and and then he's doing his, like, he's got the rest of the world that he's got to do, and then he's fighting one of the best kick fighters, of his generation at that time, that's coming to Adelaide. And Steve knew, because he's not a dumb guy, Steve knew all of the benefits of Israel thing and what his deficits might be, but he's still prepared for it, and Steve still became like an Australian champion and all that. And so the job was to break Israel down, to try to be, basic, if you will, work the clinch. Steve had a really horrible and I mean horrible for the person, downward elbows, his clinch was really strong, go to that body, just break him down, sort of like basically Rocky versus Apollo Creed, that sort of thing. Obviously that didn't happen, but it was a fucking great fight. I mean, you want to see good fights in that era, watch Steve versus Charles August. Well, that's a bloodbath.
That's a fucking good fight. I watched that. I can't remember. It was one of my earlier podcasts. I think it was Miles, my first podcast I did with Miles.
Yep.
He said, go back and watch August and fucking Bihan.
Yep.
And, oh my goodness.
That was a violent, because August at that time was experienced and aggressive, a really tough guy.
And Adesanya beat, or they fought each other as well in a very good fight as well.
Yeah. I mean, Israel fought fucking He fought the best that Adelaide had and the best Australia had at that time. I personally think that he peaked as a kickboxer.
Oh, 100%. That's the funny thing about Pereira and Adesanya. People think who don't follow combat sports think they're just MMA fighters. Yeah. This is the tail end of their career, this MMA journey. Yeah. Like they had their primes in kickboxing.
And they don't realize. I don't think the average person realizes, especially casual man, how much damage kickboxing
it kills
takes.
You. Yeah. It's the most brutal sport in the world, and it's not even the fights; it's the training.
The training, exactly. And the like, this is a reason why, like, K1 fighters and Muay Thai fighters, they peak at a certain age. It's destructive on the body. Like in boxing, for example, you can change your style accordingly and become a Larry Holmes or a George Foreman or a Bernard Hopkins. It's very hard to do that in kickboxing. And when the guys do that, like you watch a Maurice Smith, who once he gets, he's someone that people think of as an MMA fighter first, but his kickboxing career and pedigree from the full contact days that he kicks around above the waist and his K1 type kickboxing and that, man, that guy fucking has a phenomenal career, and he fought until a very advanced age, and that's impressive. They're rarities, and to see someone like go from kickboxing to MMA, how many jiu-jitsu guys do you see doing that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we're still told that that's the most important aspect. How many wrestlers do you see doing that? How many, we don't, but with kickboxers, a certain mindset to the point where I feel that MMA is sort of like, has become to a degree, this is a very minor degree, almost like glorified kickboxing. You know what I mean?
When you see two like watching Khalil and Pereira, it was a kickboxing
Well,
fight.
even like how often do guys do get those, especially at the higher weights where there's more consequences, they do get takedowns, they do hold them there because it's bounce back up, and then you get a grappler wrestler type who's trying to strike, that sort of thing. And it's because it's hard. It's hard to put a person on their back. It's hard to keep them there, hard to hold them there, and it's hard to take that risk against all the strikes that are coming in. And then when those strikes hit you, they freaking hurt and they sap your energy.
I fucking would rather get punched straight in the nose than do a wrestling class. I've done one wrestling class my whole life.
Yeah.
And it was the fucking worst experience I've ever had.
Level changes. Changes. There's a reason why, unfortunately, wrestling is like
so hard.
The redheaded stepchild of the combat sports in Australia. It is so freaking hard.
It's like obscenely hard though. Like if I ever had a child, that would be the first thing I put them in, so they get used to it.
Yeah.
Because if you can get used to those, just the fucking training session, you are going to be so well set for general life that you're going to be fine.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it, right? Like, so wrestling is sort of like a sprint. So if you're going in there, like, especially with more of an MMA or a jiu-jitsu mindset, you'll get penalized for passivity. So you'll be penalized for being too passive.
Yeah.
So you've got to constantly go. You've got to forward pressure, level changes. It's not just the takedowns, it's the counters. Like, you can be a really good high-level wrestler and not have the best takedowns.
Yeah.
But you can counter, and then the groundwork, and then the positions that you get put in and you can't tap out, you get pinned. And sometimes those positions are very punishing, and that intensity is frightening. And I feel the reason why wrestlers do very well in other combat sports, say MMA for example, isn't so much the technique, because Greco is probably better for MMA because of the high body posture, the hips up and stuff like that.
I think even just the gas tank you get from it, the mentality.
It's the mindset.
Yeah.
Because you think about it this way. So if you're an elite level wrestler from America or somewhere like that, you're doing, like, say if you go to one of their big competitions where it's like a heat where you've got to get eliminated for nationals, you're meeting in a place where, like I say, you go to a Fargo and you're meeting in a place for a whole week, you're going to make weight every day. Sorry, mate. You're making weight every day, right? And then you're competing against, 16 people every day to seed through. That's to qualify maybe for, a national team or Olympic team. That takes a tenacity and a focus and a desire that you can't fabricate that. That is legitimate. That is will. And I feel that's what makes wrestlers so much better than a lot of other combat athletes. Not so much the technique and not so much the wrestler versus this or whatever else. It's that. It's that process is hard.
Yeah, there's no lucky double legs. Like, you can get a lucky jab on someone or a lucky fucking overhand right. There's no lucky... No. Like, in wrestling, you get what you reap. Like, you get... It's fucking crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can tell just from the strength, like, shout out to Taylor, like what she did, going to the Olympic Games. It's fucking incredible.
And wrestling at a high, this is the thing that people don't realize as well. Like, we'll use Taylor as a perfect example, right? So Taylor is competing at a high level. She did a bit of jiu-jitsu stuff to stay active. She will come in and every now and then do a bit of striking movement or whatever, but she predominantly wrestling, let's say. The poor little thing, her knees and all these injuries she's carrying, she doesn't make it a thing, right? She doesn't identify as injured, right? She's carrying more injuries, for preparation that most people would realize. But she'll get in there, she'll do the work, she'll help others do the work. I remember Adam Collett when I had my gym, right? Adam Collett was training for one of his fights, right? We're getting him ready and all this sort of stuff. She's coming in similar weight to him. She's coming in. She was doing wrestling rounds, like MMA wrestling rounds on the cage and all that. Adam has a tendency, bless him, love him. He'll headbutt you sometimes, right? Not intentionally. He smashed
just
her.
Pressure.
Just using it as a post, because in wrestling you use it as a post, right? He smashed her in the face repeatedly, and it was literally like a duck of water's back. Like she's like that, okay? That's the mindset. Now, if you do that to a lot of other people, and that constant head pressure, shoulders, elbows to the face, it's work cover, that sort of thing. But with that attitude, that's what it's like. If I was to make a comeback tomorrow, let's say, and I was going to get in shape, it would be the wrestlers, predominantly with people that have done wrestling and that I would lean into to help me get ready more than anyone else. And that's because they've consistently been there for me personally, and they've helped others all over that journey, because they are willing to, because they come from a pariah position in Australia as a sport where they are happy to get whatever help they can get for competition, because not many people want to speak that language, and they understand what it's like to prepare for a certain sport. So they get it, right? And they'll work hard, they'll train with you, they'll do all that sort of stuff. And it's a completely different animal with the intensity and all that. And when you see someone like her, like I remember when she was training for the Commonwealth Games, right? She had a lot of stuff going on in her life, and she'd come to training when I was doing a bit of conditioning stuff with her. All these background things happening in her life. She never made an excuse for herself. She turned up consistently. She worked hard, and she went at the highest level at that time competition with a very short camp, with a very limited camp, with very limited training partners, and she still won fucking silver medal.
You're a freak, man.
Now, exactly that mindset. Do you know how many guys turn up to training consistently? You know what I mean?
3 out of 10.
Exactly. How many people in general do that? And so there's that strength of will, and that's what I'm talking about when it comes to that. And that strength of will is the most important thing. And then coaching, and then helping others prepare. That's fucking,
And having a job, and like
having a job,
life problems, shit happens every day.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's funny. She made me fucking straight up cry after a training session once. I didn't know who she was at all.
She came there.
That's exactly what happened. She came in and just fucked me up, and I was like pretty new to training, and I got in my car and I was like, what the fuck just happened?
And do you know the fucked thing? This is the thing. Sorry, this is the thing that shits me off. Right, this sums up Adelaide down a bit. This is me pissed off with Adelaide. Right, I was doing a self-defense thing with her. Right, where she was taking full reign of it, but I was helping her out with it a little bit. So she was going to bring in women to do some self-defense. Do you know how many fucking people turned up? You have an Olympic athlete, you have a Commonwealth Games medalist and all that. One of the most Commonwealth, all these people on Facebook, I'm going to attend. Half the time it was me and her just hanging out, fucking getting chips from your shop.
Really?
Because
yes, at Darks, I remember you were doing that, yeah.
But all these people are going to come, right? And I had obviously with my gym, when I stupidly thought that people want to learn self-defense, right? How dumb was I? I was trying to do that. People will say they want to come, they don't fucking turn up. You have one of the best brains in the area that can teach, body mechanics. She can teach all this sort of stuff, and that is but she turned up every day. She was never depressed from it. She was never like, this is what it is. It's what it is. That's the attitude, right? It's like, it's financially not ruining it, but it's financially disadvantaging her because that she wasn't getting paid for that experience. All this sort of stuff. And that sums up the mindset. That's the difference between the voyeuristic mindset of the people that like the social media world now that we have, the terminal online, where people are like, oh yeah, I'll turn up, I'll do that. And then the people that turn up, you've got two coaches there sitting, waiting. And that's what wrestling suffers. Wrestling suffers, it's full of people that were going to do it, that want to do it, they never turn up, and then you've got wrestling coaches just sitting there twiddling their thumbs.
I think it's hard in Australia because we don't have that culture from a young age that America does. In America, you are forced into wrestling at a young age. So it's built within their culture, whereas I think Australia just still isn't there yet.
Nah. I mean, but to be fair, we punch above in combat sports. Australia punches above its weight.
We're insane at it.
In jiu-jitsu and grappling, fuck man, Australia
Muay Thai,
MMA, how many good, considering how many people actually do it, it's just, for some reason, wrestling just hasn't popped, right? It used to be boxing. We had some really good boxers in Australia. We still do, but consistently at a high level. Like we had names that still regarded the world over. And So when we're talking about with Adelaide with the Muay Thai, we had that for a while. But now with Jiu-Jitsu, I mean, these guys, Craig Jones, for example, like, when Lockie Gillis was doing his thing, all these guys, that is incredible that like Australia is producing that level of ability in those comments. So we're still definitely punching above our weight, but for some reason wrestling,
What was a wild young Miles Simpson like as a young man?
It's funny because I remember making these videotapes for little Timmy Shannon, one of Miles' friends. And, I'd like put together all like UFCs and free fights and street fights and Gracie in action. And I'd put them on a videotape. And, when you have to, dub from one tape to the other.
Yeah.
And I'd sell them at the abattoirs and I'd sell them at all these different places for $50 a bootleg fight tapes. And Miles was one of those guys that got me these tapes and would like sit there and absorb it. And then you'd see him. I think Miles was like making like 50-something kilograms when he was fighting in Muay Thai and all that. And he was only a little puppy dog sort of thing. He'd turn up and but he'd always turn up. He'd always work hard and he'd just do the rounds and all that. And then he'd slowly adjust it. I remember taking him to the wrestling club when I was going there and all that. And we'd just go there and he just did it. He would do whatever. He was the most coachable person, hardest working. And like one of those guys, same with B-Man, all those kinds of, they would do it. They would turn up. They'd do it. They'd do the rest of their comfort zone. They're Muay Thai guys going to Thailand, learning how to do Muay Thai clinches and, all that sort of stuff. And then they're learning wrestling posture, which is a completely different animal to the Muay Thai posture. And they would do it. And yeah, I wouldn't say he's an animal, but he has the C word in him. And he would never back down. And he had that fire. I remember, what's his name? Charlie Zelenov. All right. So
Charlie Z, I've gone down some fucking rabbit holes of his.
Here's a fun little story, right? So back in the day, I used to be very prolific on BoxRec, and which is a boxing forum, right? And Charlie Z and all the, what were they called? The Trailer Park Boxing Series. They'd have their little things and they'd be posting all that stuff. And I created this personality and I'd shitstorm and just put up fake videos challenging him and all this sort of shit and just getting reactions now. And anyway, so Charlie Z would message me on Facebook and he'd talk about going to Thailand and getting some fixed fights to get his fucking whatever else. And then I kind of got him in touch with Miles, and he was trying to negotiate with Miles about he's going to fight Miles.
Are you fucking kidding?
Yeah, Miles was there.
Charlie Zelenov.
Charlie Zelenov in 2009, 10 or whatever.
500 no.
Yeah, 500 yeah. from migrant workers that he just randomly hires for the day. Yeah, so back then he was shit talking with Miles and going to fight Miles, but he never did because it's Charlie Z and he doesn't fight.
Fuck, that would have been.
That was a good old days. Yeah,
Miles has slowly, or not slowly, but well deserved. He's become one of the most important figures in MMA in South Australia now.
Oh, definitely. There's a lot of guys that have stuck the course, but that M16. Yeah, it's awesome.
I'm surprised that you don't hold a class there or something. Did you get your heart broken too many times with like fighters?
I don't know. I just don't think there's room, honestly, because I don't mean like room in the sense of geographical room. I mean like Miles
just in your life.
That, but also I think that he's already got really good coaches there. He's already got like MMA guys and all that. Like I would certainly help out, and I have every now and then done that. But to consistently do it, I don't think out of season, MMA is something that people consistently want to do. They want to do the jiu-jitsu and they want to do kickboxing, that sort of thing. I would probably be keen to do a self-defense sort of thing. That's where my heart would be. Outside, I still want to do self-defense and still want to coach self-defense stuff. I don't think that we have the market for it, to be honest. I don't think people want to do it because people think that doing jiu-jitsu, think that doing MMA is going to give them self-defense. That's all well and good for the athletes and for young men who aren't under threat as much as others might be. But that's what I want to do, self-defense.
When you talk self-defense, are you specifically talking for women?
In general.
Just in general.
I mean, female self-defense is probably something a little bit more specific. I would say if I was going to I wouldn't do a female self-defense class outside of having female coaches with me, just to have them communicate and show the technique. Because for me at 100-something kilograms, demonstrating is not as... it's not something they want to see because, it's easy for you to do it because you're a big guy, right? So I'd send them more to Carly Jangle with the females fighting forward and that sort of stuff because that's their cup of tea. I would rather do like specifically, when I had my own gym, I was looking to do like beta to alpha, for example, doing a training program where guys that are a little bit insecure about themselves and just learning how to be more self-confident, just, getting them to spar, getting them to do more outside of lifting weights for the mirror, that sort of shit, like more specifically functional like fight conditioning, some of the shit that I do on Instagram, that or whatever else. I was also going to do like a guardian type training, which is more for, generally speaking, men, but more like just being a protector, learning how to shepherd and herd, when a fight breaks down, right, the easiest thing to do is to get involved in melee. But how do you move kids out of that situation? You know, how do you be aware for other people that are sometimes not as combative literate, for example? How do you do that? That sort of awareness and that sort of training. And I was going to do more like tactical stuff. I was sort of doing that before COVID made it difficult for people to come, because I was doing quite a few interstate and overseas people. So like, you know, firearm retention, personal protection sort of people, that sort of thing. I was looking to do more of that, you know, and weapons stuff.
Do you have your firearms license and all that?
Yeah. But like this stuff was more niche. I had people that were going to Afghanistan to protect people, and I was doing some stuff with like some Koreans that were working for Korean corporations. So whenever they travel with different different organizations, they would protect their VIPs, that sort of stuff. So I was looking at that sort of thing. And then of course, like what I was doing with my gym is people that had sexual violence and domestic violence and all that, and giving them a place where they could go. And not so much for them to learn how to throw the correct punch or how to do an elbow or do, you know, that was there definitely, but it was giving them a place where they could find that anger and that, you know, to give them the ability to fucking beat the shit out of the bag, to get a woman that, you know, had horrible things happen to her, get a baseball bat and beat the fuck out of that heavy bag.
Because it is hard to find that anger for a lot of fucking people. Where they can't, you have to know how to find it.
These people had it. They had it mixed with shame.
It would have just been suppressed down.
And they're told. People get told different things, right? And different things work for different people at different stages of their lives, right? If someone comes to me in a shitty old shed in McLarenville, and you know, and I'm teaching certain things, they've reached a certain stage in their life where they have found that voice and they've found that anger. And they don't want to be scared anymore. They don't want certain things. They want to say no, and they want to mean it, and they want to be adamant about it. And you want to help them. So you want to give them. You want to say, look, I found in fights this would work for me. You want to be someone that's a human being that listens and respects what they've experienced, and you want to teach them how to, you know, to be a rabbit so they can climb over my cage and escape that situation, for example, right? Or how to manifest a certain righteous indignation and to fucking destroy scum. You know what I mean? To fucking destroy it. Now, it's easy for me at 6'1" and a bit and, you know, whatever, to take on grown men, right? But when you're a 5' nothing lady, that your entire life you've been told that you're a second-class citizen, that you've been told that you're weak mentally and physically, and that's been affirmed, you know, constantly affirmed by abusive partners and by people, you know, and being dependent on a police force that doesn't really have much compassion and concern to some of these victims. When you have people like that, you have to look at them in the eye and you just tell them, like, yeah, let's fuck shit up, you know what I mean? Like, let's seriously do it, and you try to teach them how to do things. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to get in there and fight Francis Ngannou, but I mean, I'm looking around, the average guy's pretty fucking pathetic, you know what I mean? And I've seen some of these, like, we'll use Taylor, for example. She could beat the fuck out of most guys, you know? She just needs to know how to do certain things, you know, and it's a mindset. And so you give that to a lot of them, but the thing is, what I found is that's an ugly place. Violence is ugly, real violence. I'm not talking playing a sport, I mean real violence. You know, multiple opponents or sexual violence, waking up at 3 a.m. and someone that's supposedly a family member or a loved one holding you down and trying to choke the life out of you and trying to fucking force themselves inside of you, that's real violence, you know? And that's a reality for a lot of people, but that's a reality that everyone pretends doesn't exist, but that reality is underneath the surfaces of our civilized, polite society. And a lot of those people, predominantly are women, but you know, a lot of men have had it too. They're the ones that need an outlet. They need a real place, not some bullshit fucking psychotherapy place where, you know, don't use trigger words, let's manifest our strength, and that's all that shit. I mean, a place where someone comes to you and says, look, I'm angry, I don't want that to ever happen again. You understand violence, help me. And that's what I was trying to do, and it was working for a bit, but, you know, it's hard running a gym.
Yeah, it's fucking...
When a lot of it's charity.
It's hard running a fucking gym, like,
mate.
Just in general.
Yeah. I mean, my problem is I was too generous with that sort of side of things where, like, you couldn't ask for money. Like, it was more like donation-based, right? So I'd have to sell comic books on the weekend and help out construction sites and do fucking site cleaning and be a trade assistant for people and, you know, all these random jobs to keep the gym open. And then it just got to be too hard.
I think there's just something with that road as well, man, because that spot's still empty, and that's a nice spot for anything. Like it's a nice place.
Yeah.
Like, but that just Beach Road in general is just fucking empty.
Oh, Darkside, yeah. Well, I only did. You know, it's funny. I only went to Darkside when I left my gym, right? More because like I was friends with the two people there. Like they asked if I would be interested in keep doing MMA, and I said, look, if Harry and Isaac could, I could, because both of them were training for fights. Well, Harry at the time and Isaac come shortly after. I said, I'll do an MMA class if I could just coach them out of their sort of thing. I should have just gone to M16, but I thought it would help Dark Side because they, whatever they needed the help, and so I just did that. That's why I did it, and I was not obligated, but I was there to do a class once a week. But not many people turn up for the MMA class. No one wants to do MMA. You'd sometimes have two guys training for a fight, like Harry and Isaac, for example, and then you might get some guy come off the street or a 14-year-old girl come off the street. And so I'm teaching Harry and Isaac how to do fight stuff, and then I've got to show this girl how to tie shoelaces,
Yeah.
That's what it's like. And that's MMA. You can't train fighters in the same class as people. Let's be honest, MMA is a sport, right? How do you teach someone? It's like if you go to a football oval and I rock up and I expect the A grade team or the B grade team to let me train with them, but I have no goals of actually playing football. That's MMA. That's a combat sport.
It'd be a deterrence to them.
Yeah, it is a deterrence, but like this combat sports is this place where people that are participating, the active competitors, are expected to train alongside
beginners.
Not even beginners, but people that have no ambition to compete. And so once if your goal is to go in there and win the UFC heavyweight title, and then your goal is just to hang out and get fit and do a bit of a self-help discovery session or whatever, it doesn't mix, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it is one of the only sports that it is set out like that.
Oh, all combat sports are like that. Jiu-jitsu, karate, whatever, it is like that. So you got to have a separate class, but then you can't have separate classes because most coaches are time poor. And, the people that are the casuals that don't really want to do it, they're the ones that sometimes, pay the bills, if you will. And fighters generally are poor, so they can't pay fuck all. So that's the reality, right? Like, you know what I mean? It's yeah.
Isaac's a fucking special athlete. He knows exactly how to be violent, that bloke.
Intuitively. Even when he was playing soccer, which is supposed to be a gentle sport.
He's a fucking violent man.
Very violent. And very powerful too.
That Muay Thai debut he had, that bloke's brain, I was just like, oh my God.
I honestly feel, and I've said this to Isaac, I feel K1 rules, like I reckon Isaac would be a machine under those rules. Like
fuck fighting that cunt for free. Oh my God.
That's what I mean. I think that would be more like that I think for his style, his power, his mind, I think he would do really, really well. If it was 1999, 2003, that period, he would be a K1 style like fighting. He could aspire to that. Like it's like Brando, for example, as well. Like he's one of those guys. They would be that's what they would. I think personally, they would have been awesome at. Like in the league of the Andy Hoogs and the Slowinskis and the the Peter Etz and stuff like that. Like that level, that's what they could aspire to be, because that's a rule set I think would complement them better.
Yeah, it's watching him fight in that Muay Thai fight was just incredible. It was like this. It's so fun because it's like, he can't get taken down. It's violent. So he's just gonna have to stand up with him.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck that. And
he's going to come across a lot of guys of equal temperament.
That's what I'm excited to see, though. It'll be interesting because he hasn't really been, besides the loss, that was more just him being kind of, was it Honey Bear that he...
it was. Damien.
But that was more like just of a kind of wrestle fuck, like pressure.
I feel, I'm not going to take Damien's victory away from him because, he's a tough dude and he's good at what he does. I feel that was good timing on Damien's behalf because he got Isaac at a certain period. Yeah, not so much early, just got Isaac just at a nexus point, right? And, I feel that was partly, I'll take responsibility, perhaps my coaching and my inability to give those guys at that time, because, I couldn't coach all the time, and so they're making do with what they got. I personally think if you have fighters like Isaac, Harry, Damien Volar, or whatever, if you have a place full of young guys that all want to fight, you don't even need a fucking coach.
It's very true.
You'd be like shoot box, you know what I mean?
It's very true.
You need young guys that are working together, close in weight, pushing each other, training together, communicating with one another. That's what you need, right? You can't have a gym where you've got people walking off the street that are never going to fight, that are unathletic, and you can't expect fighters to progress at that stage.
That's what I think special about what Benetti's doing. He does not.
I think so too.
He just is fucking just me and these four dudes.
Yeah.
Everyone else can fuck off.
And I think, and that's what, like in the past you had at the Firm, you got that at M16, you had that at Flinders Muay Thai, you got like at Trinity, you got all these gyms across Adelaide where you've got a lot of young fit guys that want to do that sort of thing. And I feel that's what or girls if it's female fighters, but it's predominantly guys. And you got that. If you have that, that's what you need, and that's where you get elite level training. And because what happens is, as long as they're competing with each other and they help each other with their progress rather than try to beat the shit out. If your training partners are your competition, you're fucked. You know what I mean?
You lose your years in the gym.
Yeah. So what you've got to do is you want to be competitive with under certain contexts, but that's how you work up. But instead, I think sometimes a lot of them leave it in their gym and their best fights are in their gym. And history is full of fighters like that, Guys that are notorious for the gym. Like the boxing we were talking before, that's full of them. Like you got guys like Roy Tiger Williams, and you got a lot of the 1970s boxers and all that. They have these great reputations with their gym work and their gym wars. They get kicked out of like Muhammad Ali's fight camp and all that because they're trying to knock out the champ. And then their careers go away. They fade away because no one wants to work with them. I mean, Hector Lombard, perfect example of him. He has a very bad reputation as being...
He's fighting in Australia.
Yeah, good for him.
Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
He's fighting on Hex.
Oh, is he fighting on Hex? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck's going on there, but he's fighting on Hex FC.
Well, he's someone who had that ferocious, violent talent, so using Isaac as an example, that had that ferocity in their meat, in their sinew and all that, and that violence and that athleticism. And that's what Hector had. But the trouble with Hector is I think he got kicked out of every gym in Australia. Despite his talent as a judoka and his power, he just got kicked out of all these gyms because of whatever personality traits. And then you hear about the fucking, 16 rounds of boxing. Sorry, the 40-minute boxing round that he had with Josh Barnett in, Eric Paulson's gym over, ego sparring. It's like you hear about all that sort of stuff. And that doesn't help a fighter long term because he just goes from place to places, and his career becomes deficit.
Yeah, he looks really saucy at the moment too. I don't know what they're injecting him to keep him alive. Cause
he's probably Yoel Romero. He's genetically very gifted, but then there's probably also...
I don't know what the fuck they made with Yoel Romero, but he'd have to be in his late 40s at close to
even when
50s.
He's young though, he looked pretty...
He's always looked like that, but just to continue it.
I've seen kids at the wrestling academy years ago that were like 12, 13, and they were like shredded. And I'm like, I'm a professional athlete. And I'm thinking, how the fuck is this kid like so much more jacked than I am? Yeah. Some people are genetically gifted as well. There are a lot of stuff out there. But you look at a lot of old fighters, you look at the Sam Langford and the George Godfrey era and the Jack Johnson era in boxing and all that, and you look at the photos, that's before PEDs, right? That's when, a brisk walk and some bone broth and some rum and you'll be on your way. That was that era of nutritional advice for a prize fighter. And you look how shredded these guys are. Look how jacked these guys are. Like, there are some people out there that are specimens. Like, just physical specimens. And that, to me, is actually worse than performance-enhancing drugs because they're genetically gifted, which is, that's even...
So unfair.
It's so unfair.
It's so unfair.
It's so unfair. It's like, they're naturally... Going back to Steve Bean, right? He wasn't that person. He had to work twice as hard as anyone else because he wasn't genetically gifted as a combat athlete, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he had to work freaking out like a Forrest Gifford type fighter, they have to work so hard to get it.
It would be frustrating being like that and then just seeing some of these fighters that can have 2 weeks off training and then go fight one night, but they were out drunk the week before and then they fucking just clean up their opponents.
I think that's also being young too. I think that's being young too.
Some people just do have there is a certain, people also forget that fighting takes a lot of fight IQ. Yeah. And some people do just have such a fucking fantastic fight IQ.
I was only having this conversation with Harry, right? The other night at M16 when we were training. I was trying to explain to him that overtraining is far worse than undertraining.
Yeah.
Because every time I've done stupid shit, like in my experience, with overtraining, you can't even warm up. You got nothing. You're a dead man walking. You get in there, you feel crap, crampy, no energy. You can't even clench your hands because you're too tired. Whereas if you're undertrained, like say you take fight on a short notice and you're a little fatty that's been eating custard tarts, and you just go in there, you know that you got a round. You know what I mean? You can warm up. You go, all right, I got 5 minutes in me.
It's going to be the best 5 minutes of my life.
Exactly. You can do it. Like that you're going to be, So you go, all right, I got a round. I got to try to get this done in a round. It gives you a goal. You go in there overtrained. You haven't got a round. You can't even warm up.
Yeah.
You go in there and you're going, all right, yeah, and you cut your timings off. Everything's. What good's that? But for some reason, there's an inclination to overtrain, especially at a lower level. When sometimes it's like maybe just come in a little undercooked and test yourself. See how good you go. Hey, you don't have to. You're not running a marathon. You know what I mean? But that requires the shadow boxing and the fight training and focusing on that first and everything is secondary. Like say I'll use for example When first time I went over to Sydney, right, to train with those UFC guys, I thought that I was going to be like, oh, fuck, this is going to really suck. I'm going to really like be in deep water and all this sort of stuff. Thinking that the conditioning was going to be the hard part. The conditioning was really easy because it was like we might train 2 to 3 times a day, right? And the conditioning was subservient to the fight stuff. So you'd do wrestling training, right? You might just practice for an hour, move practice for an hour. You might do jiu-jitsu stuff to guard pass for an hour. And the spar, everything was, if you can't spar, if you're not sparring clean, smart, and effectively, and if you're just slugging and going toe to toe, then you're in trouble. Like you'll be in trouble. If you went there and you're trying to knock each other out, you'd be in trouble. The coaches will stop sparring and, you know, right, we're going to do something else. Go hit the heavy bag, right? But it should be clean, effective work, listen to that. So it will be all about that, right? And then the conditioning stuff was, you know, jumping mats, basic plyometrics, doing handstands on your hand, really light weights. That was that stuff. But then it was like, all right, we're going to do 10 rounds on the heavy bag and then pummel, or, you know, work with some rugby players or whatever else. That was the conditioning stuff. But it was all about making sure that you could do the 12 trainings a week rather than 2 really, really hard trainings and then ghosting through the other ones.
Yeah.
And that was the most important part. But this is the most important, because there's sometimes when my guy, like say James, was a bit flat and it was like, take the day off. You know, that was his coaches. These coaches and other people around was like, take the day off, you know, relax. And, you know, and that's more important. And then you come in and they're fighting at the highest level. He was fighting at the highest level, you know, and that is something that you have to learn. And that is professionalism. That's professionalism. You can't shortcut that. You can't microwave that. You can't montage it. You've got to do it and apply it. And that's, I think, sometimes a bit deficit with some people.
You do get some fighters now that link up with these like strength and conditioning coaches, and it's like a fucking, like they're training to go to outer space.
Oh, you've got these guys that want to justify their degree in sport. Like, they go, you know, basically what you want to do is you want to understand the progressive overload. You want to work out the mitochondria of the muscles.
John Jones used to smoke meth before fights.
Mate, seriously,
Go up and
strength and conditioning guys, like, bless them, they do one thing specifically, like, and it's like fighting is not that. Fighting is not a CrossFit match. It is not a bodybuilding competition. It's not that. Fighting is fighting. And you can get in there and you can have a guy that's moving in front of you and he's just doing smart footwork and just moving and driving and stuff like that, and he will gas you from his movement. And you haven't even hit him. You know, he's been a Willy Pep in front of you. Now, what kind of fucking strength and conditioning guy is going to tell you to fix that? You know, that's this. Why is it that George Foreman at 45 or even at 48 when he fought Shannon Briggs, right? Went 12 rounds to Shannon Briggs, right? Why is it he was able to put in a good work rate at 48 years of age? Because it's this more than this. Strength and conditioning guys don't even worry about that. You know what I mean? And they'll talk about mindset and they'll use memes and all this sort of stuff. And not all of them, just stereotyping, of course. They're training to expend energy, whereas fighting is about being energy efficient.
Conserving as much as possible.
It's cool about conserving, exactly, and understanding your mind and your body. It's understanding, all right, I'm going to throw a punch, oh, my shoulder's gone, okay, now what? You know,
it's also the ability to just push through those things that tell most people, okay, we need to stop now. But
circumvent them.
Yeah.
So it's sort of things like, I shared it to Harry, speaking of which, there's a fight with Danny Williams, Mike Tyson's previously last opponent, when he fought Danny Williams and Kevin McBride, you know, when he's declined. Danny Williams is an English boxer that was pretty decent level and all that, but there's a fight that's out there on Instagram and his shoulder pops. He just pops out of place and he just has to fight his guy just with the left jab, right? And he's just fighting, and then he ends up winning with the left hook, right? He doesn't panic. He doesn't get all tense. He understands my arm's fucking gone, you know? I got to keep going. There's no drama. It's just professionalism and working past it. And it's not that the pain is absent, it's probably numb, it's probably in shock, whatever. It's the fact that he's just, all right, I can't show the right hand, I've got to show this.
Just cut it off, let's keep going.
Eddie Chambers of this is Adamic, right? Another boxing match, right? Eddie Chambers, his arm goes in the fight, right? In the first round. And he still does 12 rounds against one of the best guys in the world because he works around it. Where's your strength and conditioning coach in that one? You know, that is a fighter fighting and being astute and intelligent. Now, I'll get people, I'll put up a story, right? And someone will go, more than someone goes, oh, Goggins runs 400 kilometers. And I'm like, oh, cool, good, go your hardest, you know? I'll fight him in the street, you know? Like, that's
he tried to call out Sean Strickland.
Yeah, I know, but you know what I mean? That's what you'll get this. You'll get some person that will say that to you, like, okay, cool. You know, or they'll mention some person, or, oh, you know, this person does that, why don't you do this? I'm like, I don't know, I just did 1,000 kicks in my living room while watching K1 fights. You know, what do you want me from me? You know, I'm just some dude, you know? But my point is, like, if you want to get efficient at kicking, you kick. You want to get efficient at punching, you punch. It's very simple, right? Now, I could put the shoelaces on and go do 14 kilometers and all that. I find it boring. It hurts my knees after a while. I get sore back, especially from running in road and stuff like that. I don't want to be a runner, but I still want to be able to defend myself in a fight, right? So I'll do 2,000 strikes sometimes when I do that, but that's conditioning. It's explosive training, it's movement, and I'll do different ways. I might jump cross left hook 10 times, right? But then I'll rotate, I'll just jump cross left, rotate, jump, that sort of thing. Or I'll move back and practice different things like that. It's that repetition, that muscle memory, but I'm trying to be energy efficient. Now, that's not hard to do. You and I could do that right now and here, you know what I mean? That's not hard to do, right? But why is that seen as an obscene or an unusual methodology, right? So where's the strength and conditioning coach on that? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? But they'll say, do this, do that, and they'll give you these theories. And I'm like, that's great. But like, are you getting your fighters to do that sort of stuff? The fighter needs to be a fighter first. They need to understand the fundamentals. They need feedback, obviously, from sparring and sparring drills, all that sort of shit too. But if that is not something that's part of their game, like, just shadowboxing card or whatever, what are they doing? Like,
I reckon also they're bringing in these fucking freak scientists to help with strength and conditioning, because there's a massive culture in MMA now of not fighting at your appropriate weight class, but trying to get an edge and fighting fucking at the one below. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the science
every single edge, but you'd be fucking better off not fighting so depleted that you're actually knocking on death's fucking door.
That with the weight cutting thing, that's a mindset thing as well. That like fighters have this fetish for size and all that, and it's like, and I feel the ones that do really good are the ones that don't get caught up in that whole thing. I mean, yeah, size does make it matter, but is it everything? What's worse? You ask most fighters, what's worse, speed and timing? Like, some guy that's faster than you.
How the fuck did Pereira make middleweight? Like, that just baffles me.
I mean, I remember, like, you'd see Michael Bisping sometimes. He's walking around 105 kilos. He's making 84 kilos. And it's like, and he's a thick dude. Like, how are they doing that? But they do it. But the strength and conditioning stuff in that high level, that's like, in the AFL, that's every high level sport now, where they've got like all of these people that are coming in. And yeah, it does help. I'm sure it does help and all that sort of thing. But the fundamentals of the game, I think, should be more important than anything else. And like, I feel that it's because athletes and fighters, there's such an investment in, they're a product first, that there's a big investment by a sports team or an organisation like the UFC that they're putting into these fighters, so they need to justify it and rationalise it, and so to satisfy insurance, to satisfy all this other stuff, they need to make sure that they're like, finely tuned athletes. But then, as we see repeatedly, they get discarded pretty easily, you know what I mean? And to me, that's a more fascinating thing when it comes to a fighter. It's like, what happens next? What happens when you fall short? When you are playing it to the bone and it snaps, the muscle goes, and you can't do that sport ever again. What next?
Do you follow any other sports?
No, not really.
There's just nothing better. It's so weird. Whenever people tell me they don't watch combat sports, I'm like, well, just why? Like, why? I don't get it at all.
I do get it. I get it. Some people think it's vulgar and violent and whatever else. You get that. That's fair enough. I find other sports to be unexciting myself personally.
Just ball sports with ball. Like, it's so low stakes to me that I'm like, if they lose, they just play next week.
I think but it's relatable. You know what it is? Like, if we were to, let's say there's 20 blokes here, or 20 people here, right? And they had a soccer ball, we could put together a soccer game pretty easy, right? Like, you and I probably never played soccer really, but we could put together a ball sport. Everyone has fun. You can do it. Your uncle can hold his beer. Your aunt can smoke a durry. You can play soccer. Like, you can work it out. We're not playing at Isaac's level. We're not playing at, at Pele's level, but we're playing soccer in the backyard. Now, if you did that, say you're doing that at the family get-together and you're having cage fights or boxing matches, even wrestling matches, you turn into a fucking idiot. You know what I mean? You turn into Kimbo Slice and, you just look like an idiot, and it's not attractive, right? Yeah. So fighting is so unrelatable. Fighting is to pornography what it is to a virgin, you know what I mean? They're attracted to it, but they don't understand it, and that's fighting. So most guys think that they could do it, that it wouldn't be too hard. They'll give you all their opinions as to why, that guy, I watched him fight, he was gassing out pretty easy.
It's easy on the couch with your beer.
It really is, and it's not relatable. But playing sports ball is pretty relatable, because all through school we'd all played sports ball at some time, even people that weren't into it. So you can understand it. So it's sort of relatable. And I feel that's a big thing with fighting. But a lot of people are turned off. Do you know what I think really turns people off fighting? Is the fans.
Oh, we're fucking putrid sometimes.
Mate, the amount of people that hate UFC and hate on MMA because of the fans.
Yeah.
But then you got dudes that think that they're tough because they're fans.
Yeah, you do.
Like, you get guys like, no, mate, I watch UFC, eh? Yeah, I'm pretty tough. That attitude is like, all right, cool.
I train UFC.
Yeah, I train UFC, exactly. And I was like, it's fucking...
So when have you always written even when you were a kid?
Yeah, I wrote my first book.
So obviously you would have been a big reader when you were younger as well.
I was lucky. Both my parents read. My grandma and grandpa had a massive bookshelf at their house, and my dad had heaps of books. Mum would read. I was always around reading.
I've never ever been able to catch the bug for reading. I just don't have the fucking concentration for it.
Do you know, it's funny. I said, one of my friends, my mate Doug, we were talking about this a little while ago about how if you see someone, right, and they're large and obese, right, and they're not walking, and you think that all they got to do is walk, a kilometre a day or whatever else, right? It's not hard. Now, in that period that you walk a kilometre, you could probably read 1,200 words, 1,800 words, right? But for some people, sitting down and reading and concentrating and focusing on reading is a lot easier, whereas other people just walking is a lot easier, right? To do both is awesome. So I think sometimes a lot of people, and it's predominantly men, because I find men don't want to read, they want audio-visual stimulation. So the fact that it's like sitting down and just reading, even just 1,200 words, to them seems like a chore.
I've always wanted to read.
Yeah,
I just can't.
But it's like any skill. It's applying. It's for the brain.
It's learning how to read.
Yeah. So like having someone read a book to you, like like an audio book, it's convenient, right? And it is good. And podcasts are awesome because people can listen to some audio while they're working and that. So there's a lot of convenience to that. But when it comes to reading, your brain thinks differently and you process things differently. You visualize, especially if it's fiction or non-fiction. You get different insights and perspectives, and it makes you think differently as well. And I feel it's a skill and it's an applied learning thing that a lot of people shy away from because it's hard. Well, going for a run's freaking hard. Going for a walk is hard for some people too, but it's the same thing. It's doing it that's the hard part. And I feel like any skill, it's just a matter of doing it. And that's why it's good to challenge yourself. Even if you pick up, a book and just read 2 pages, you're just reading 2 pages, and that's the big thing. But now I feel our attention span is sort of deplete because it's all about
the reels. It really is. And I listened to a funny thing yesterday on YouTube. I had YouTube in my AirPods and I was listening to this thing. And on Instagram Reels, you notice all the most popular Reels and stuff, they follow a certain aesthetic. They oversaturate their colours because it's the same as pokie machines. It's just overstimulating. Yeah. It cuts from frame to frame very short because there's always something new happening.
Movies went down that path for a while too. Like say the Bourne movies, for example, where the cut scenes, there was no lingering shot. Like you watch a Jackie Chan movie or whatever, you'll see an action scene and he wants you to see everything. So the camera will stay in one spot, he'll jump, spinning back kick, do a stunt, blah, blah, blah. But in those movies, it was the cutting sort of thing. And it's sort of maybe it was a stylistic choice. Also lazy because the actor can hide their inability to do certain movements and stuff, but also I feel that a lot of people are attracted to that. They want to see that fast movement. Say why TikTok is such an appealing thing to some people, or the Reels or YouTube Shorts, because I feel, and this goes back to reading, I feel that a lot of people want to understand things, but they don't have the discipline to study something. So they want the gist of information. They want a meme. Yeah. They want a meme. They want someone to go, the history of World War II in 5 seconds. So basically World War II, they want that. And then they go, I don't know about World War II.
Yeah.
They want that. And so it becomes a form of algorithm-defined infotainment, which is super dangerous when we live in a world where there's a lot of discourse and everyone thinks everything's in binaries. And so what happens is information comes so quickly and it becomes a viral trend, and then weeks later, people forget about it. Everyone's so caught up on this, and then weeks later they forget about it. Exploding goat rectums. Oh yeah, and then they forget about it. That sort of thing. It's and it's a really fascinating thing, because I've always been interested in that sort of human behavior. Why is the fidget spinner? Why is planking? Why is Pokemon Go? Why are these everything for a few months?
Undiagnosed autism.
Yeah, why is Oshies? Why you got all these people lining up for Oshies and shit like that, and then they become landfill? What the fuck,
Yeah.
That's what I think. And I think when it comes to social media trends and all that, everyone wants to talk about a thing, and then they just stop talking about it.
It's just virality.
Yeah, but what makes it viral?
Yeah,
that's the fascinating thing. Yeah, it's not a biological symptom. So it's not like a literal virus, but it's sort of like a weird thing.
The algorithm's almost like another sense now. It's like the fucking new sense because it's just its own thing. It can push anything it wants into your life, and it can make anything have any form of virality.
And it can make someone become revered and pariah, like say Andrew Tate, right? Like,
he's a fucking. At first, I was like, he's actually pretty funny. Like I thought it was a character.
Yeah.
But he is a bit of a cock. Yeah.
I would like to believe that to a degree of tongue in cheek, because I can't believe that
someone's that much of a dickhead.
But what gets me is the people that are so
his followers.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
we saw the same thing with Jordan Peterson, though. We saw the same thing with other people.
Jordan Peterson's just a fucking weird case too, isn't he?
Massively. Like, but he saved people's lives. We get that, and you might even get that with, like, say, I don't know, like a ninja.
Even you can say that about Joe Rogan too.
Oh, massively.
I'm a massive Joe Rogan dick rider, but now that I'm older, because I've been listening to his podcast for fucking 15 or fucking a long time.
I remember when the dingy days.
But now it's like I don't agree with a lot of his opinions anymore, and that's fine. Like you don't have.
But we shouldn't. We should be in a place where we can disagree with someone's opinions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Joe, whatever. I feel the trouble for me personally with Joe is I feel, and good on him, like where he has come from, where he did start, is that he sort of make or breaks things. Like, you know, like say comedians, for example, like we wouldn't have a Brendan Schaub comedian or certain other comedians because he gives them a platform.
He put all of his friends on.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's this, the Adam Sandler effect, but less talent, if you will.
It's harder though, because like I say by chance this podcast tomorrow was the biggest podcast in Australia. The first thing I would do is get Miles on.
Yeah.
The first thing I'd do is get my friends on who have businesses. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's hard to say, but then if it wasn't for Joe, you wouldn't have these mediocre fucking people with these massive followings.
And I have no problem with that. That's fine. But where I have a problem is with, and this may come down the fan base, and one of my friends I talked to about this as well, is when you do have a Terrence Howard on, for example.
He's fucking.
But that first episode he was on, right? How many people were seduced by the language and the pseudo-scientific spiritualism?
Because a lot of people find Joe Rogan's podcast as gospel, so they will believe everything on there.
That's right, and that's dangerous. And so his critics are right. We live in a world where there's no nuance and context, right? So like people can say, look, it's just a program. Joe Rogan's just having a conversation with someone over some whiskey and cigars, and that's it, nothing more than that. But now it's become this thing, right, where people think that it is a platform that is truth. Whereas rather him just going like, whoa.
Just talking. Because back in the day, it was just him fucking talking to the weird people. Yeah. And like shit. And
it was kind of like Tom Green sort of like, you know, just like, having fun in his garage.
But now people just see it as such a gospel that every guest he has on has to be fucking, they're legit.
Yeah.
They're all fact checked.
You mean aliens made Egypt? That sort of thing. And exactly. Yeah, I know. And that's the crazy thing. What sucks about that is that he can't have people of different points of views and to have these really weird and these really conventional and all this thing. He wants to bring on people that he wants to talk to, right? That's fine. That's awesome. That's all it should be. But it's not him that the problem lies with. It's not Joe Rogan.
It's the fan base.
It's the fan base and the critics, because they're doing the same thing, because legacy media, mainstream media does the same thing. They bring on the same experts. They're going to bring on the same talking heads. They're going to bring on the same type of people. And there's a favoritism of them, and they're going to push an agenda as well. But Joey's not necessarily pushing an agenda. He's literally talking to people that either he wants to hang out with.
You take what you will from it.
Yeah, or he wants to talk about, you know, I don't know, weird monkey grip strength and fucking, you know, aliens. That's what he wants to. That's great. That's awesome. And that's what his listeners understand. They understand that. The trouble is when you do have like a thing, and this goes back to the whole virus thing. Why was Terrence Howard like so? Why were people actually really like excited and believe what he was saying? And then you have someone like a Weinstein comes on, like and is generous to him, but does deconstruct what he said. But like, why are we listening to a Terrence Howard talk about certain subjects as if he's an authority? And the only reason we are is because one, Joe Rogan invited him to his platform, and two, he's famous, rich. And you know he's
fucking mentally unwell.
But that is like, you know, like 500 years ago, 600 years ago, he would probably part of an established religion. Like he'd start, you know, he would be legitimized because he was able to seduce. Why was he able to seduce so many people? Saying, you and I could hear him and go, "That's fucking retarded." I remember when I was born. It's like, what? You know what I mean? Like that should be enough. That's how we started the podcast.
Just discredited immediately.
That's when people go, all right, cool, yeah, good work. You know that. But there's so many people like just bypass that and go, oh, yep, he understands. You know, like, you know, 1 times 1 is 2. You know, he's telling you his concept of mathematics and his musical numbers and all this sort of stuff. Like that's great. But these people were really into that. And there was so many of them. Like I was watching on X, on Twitter, the amount of people that were just deconstructing this and like there's the truth and all that. And it was fascinating. Legitimate people, as in like people that, I'm not saying legitimate scientists necessarily, but I mean like people that are got, you know, like a lot of blue tick followers sort of thing. And I think, why are you guys so caught up in this? Is this some dude talking shit?
Yeah, it's the same as Reddit. Reddit's such a funny. Reddit's a fucking weird place to go sometimes.
It really is. Reddit and 4chan and all those.
Is
places.
4chan still a thing?
No, but it was.
Reddit's basically 4chan now.
It is.
For
really.
a while, but you could go. I don't know how we used to be able to find some real dark places on those fucking websites.
That was the internet in the old days. You know, you could go. The internet in the old days was the dark web. Yeah, like you know, in the 90s.
It was fucking wild west.
You could be like, you'd be like typing like to someone, and the old refresh. You'd be chatting, right? So you go like a place called the Park, for example. You know, write someone like, hey, blah blah blah, and you refresh, and it comes down. Someone sends a dead body being jacked off, and it's like, oh, fuck off. You know, that sort of thing. And then the next minute is like some person going, ah, you know, that was internet. You're having a conversation in a general chat room, and you could see like someone will post vulgar, disgusting child porn, a dead body, some racial thing, whatever else, and it was just trolls, and the trolls have always been there. And it's just, and it was probably the same people that were trolling back then were trolling now. And you'd get that. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, you know, I'm just talking. You'd get that in Christian chat. One of my friends used to go to Christian chat as an atheist, and he'd always talk about scripture and all this sort of stuff, having, you know, certain argumentative conversations with them. And you'd have some guy that would just porn bomb. And it wasn't, you know, soft porn. It was like the grossest stuff you can conjure up, like steakandcheese.com sort of stuff.
Something Dunny would send you.
Yes, that level. Exactly. Yes, exactly. That level of stuff. But, you know, you'd get that. And that was a dark web. Like, you know, that was it. Like, you know, for better and worse. But, yeah.
Yeah, and so did you used to be, like, pretty active on the internet because you used to write, like, blogs and stuff?
No, I didn't start blogging. I'd write on my computer, or I'd handwrite, or I'd typewrite. My grandma gave me a typewriter. And I didn't blog until the 2000s. And even then, I decided that when I stopped fighting professionally, I was going to go balls deep with the writing. I was doing a little bit of writing when I was fighting, but
mostly fiction.
Yeah, I'd been writing different novels for quite some time, and then when I retired, I finished my first novel. But then I was writing more fight-related stuff. I was like writing. I had like a half-cage sort of page. So I was writing about training, the process of fighting, all that sort of stuff, which I find very boring to write about now, to be honest. But I was doing that sort of thing when I was fighting. But then I decided, look, when I stop doing this, I'll really focus on this type of writing. But I was always writing like history stuff and anti-war and like sort of, I guess, like a libertarian or whatever else sort of stuff. And then so the Libertarian Institute started up in 2016, and then Scott Horton, who's the founder of the Institute, he was looking for writers. So I contacted him and said, hey, but I had to submit a heap of stuff that I'd written. He said, yep, no worries, come on board. So I got the gig as a writer, a regular writer, featured writer with him, or his institute, very early on during the formation. And then so, you know, I'd constantly be interacting over time with the Institute people and then people from antiwar.com. And so I was quite lucky that I was just communicating with that sort of stuff. So then I just I was made a fellow for the Institute last year. And then I just started doing the blogging for them and just regular writing and all that. So it was good.
And that's on conflict?
It's on a lot of things, human rights and war. Like during COVID, for example, I was writing a lot of stuff about, you know, human rights violations and people, you know, whatever perspective they had, but coming at it from more of a individual perspective rather than the cookie cut, you know, social contract bullshit, like, you know, we've got to lock everyone down, we've got to vaccinate everyone, that sort of thing. I was looking at it like more from an individual rights thing. And at that time, as you know too well, there was craziness, right?
I always say I would not love to go back to that time, but I'd love to go back for a week just to get another view of it, because it's so far away now that I can't remember it.
Do you know the fascinating thing is some people have goldfish memories, right? They ignore what was happening. They ignore their behavior.
Fucking wild.
It was crazy. We got a microcosm of what it would be like living in certain periods of history where we could see the extremes.
I seen a grown man spit on a 15-year-old at Woolies because she wouldn't sell him 2 cartons of Coca-Cola cans.
I remember, yeah, that's crazy.
On Beach Road, and I was like, "Are you fucking retarded, cunt?" I was screaming. I was like, "What the fuck's wrong with you?"
Yeah, I know.
Look, spat like a 45-year-old overweight, looked like he was on Centrelink for 40 fucking years.
And you know what? That behaviour has only been rewarded.
Yeah.
Like that gross vile behaviour, because now he would have 6 support workers, and he would be told that he's the victim. And that's another thing that's absurd now that we've got out of that whole process, is that we placated a certain neurosis and narcissism of a lot of people, and hypochondriac tendencies, I believe, and to the point where you're a bad person because you're not doing something that makes them feel better about themselves. And I remember writing a piece about, there were some towers, these public housing towers in Victoria, and they had a couple of cases of COVID, right, suspected to be in these towers. So they quarantined these entire towers, and they like blockaded them. So for 2 weeks, these people were locked in their towers, and the Victorian police were outside. And most of these people were like migrant workers, domestic violence victims that were staying in these public housing towers, while they had fled their partners and that. And they'll be giving pretty shit food, and they didn't have any internet, they didn't have all this access. And they were treated like, it was almost like a Judge Dredd type situation. And I remember writing about this for the Institute, and I would get death threats from people telling me why it's a good thing. These people deserve, it's better if they die and starve because we don't want that virus outbreak. These are people were messaging me that sort of stuff with this obscene rationale that it's better them than us. Like this whole hatred, like this violence, visceral grossness. But now, like, people getting COVID left, right, and centre. They were at the time, and it's like, do you remember the pizza shop that got shut down? Right? Woodville, yeah. How fucking insane was that?
It fucked over Adelaide. Fucked over a lot of people.
But yeah, how crazy was that? Because that whole thing, and you'd get people that, like, you'd get cops that would tell you their perspective in honest truth. They didn't believe in it. They were seeing it. I had a friend that was working security in the RA, and at the peak of it. And there's all this bullshit going on, all this theatre going on, and he's walking around in areas where there was, COVID, unmasked, whatever, just doing the whole thing. That was it. Like, there was it was such a silly thing. I remember one of my friends was staying with me when he come from Victoria, and he had to quarantine with me for 2 weeks, right? You'd have Sapol rock up. Yeah, mate, where you come from? Yeah, things like that. This far away from him, talking, unmasked and ungloved and all that. And he's, all right, mate, see you later. Good luck, bye. That's how serious they took it. I remember doing a comic book and toy thing during it, and we had to have it in the Marden Centre. We had to have it, instead of like layers, we had to have it squared, and then we had the COVID marshals there, and then we had the SAPOL guys walking through. COVID marshal over here, mate. Those people over there aren't social distancing. I'm going to have to talk to the organiser. We're going to have to charge $5,000 for blah blah blah, and that was their attitude. Like it's like these cops were fining people for not social distancing by being this close to them to tell them that they were not social distancing. And there's this absurdness and this sort of just like this irrationality, and people were completely fine with it.
It's such a wild time, and that was the first taste of if shit hits the fan from, I don't know about, probably my generation.
We saw who people are.
Yeah.
We saw who people are. That's all it was. And I think we shouldn't let people forget who they were. And the thing that I really didn't like about it was, I was coaching some kids. I remember this one guy, right, young guy. He had to get the vaccination for university, right? He didn't want to get it. He had autoimmune problems already. He started having like heart problems. It was one of the early incidences I recall. Had all these heart problems. The doctors were denying that it was caused by that. He had to get a second one. Had real heart problems. He couldn't play soccer anymore. He couldn't do the training with me anymore because he was told that he couldn't get his heart rate above a certain level because of precautions and all this sort of stuff. But he became pariah. Like, he was treated with complete disdain because how dare he get sick
from the vaccine?
How dare he? Yeah. And there are other people that since have come to me for the stuff I've written. They've told me their experiences and how they had problems in their health and all that. And okay, they're probably, you can work out the statistics and be disheartened and say, it was only so many people and so many people, whatever. You can come down to that rationale, but these are human beings that had an experience, and their experience was completely relegated and disregarded, and they were told that it was for some greater good, or they should just do what everyone wants them to do. And they still ended up getting COVID anyway. They still had that COVID experience that everyone else did. I didn't get the vaccination. Not because I'm like anti-vax or anything like that. I just felt I didn't need it. I wasn't. You're
a fucking fit dude.
Yeah, I focused on health.
A cold's not going to kill you.
Exactly. I didn't think that. Exactly. I wasn't in that demographic of risk. I wasn't visiting hospitals or any of that sort of stuff. I wasn't traveling. I didn't really. I didn't get flu vaccinations either. Right. Turns out I have never really had the flu as bad as everyone tells me it can be. And when I did get COVID, and the only reason I knew I had COVID was because we had to do the tests for or the spit test or whatever, because Nick was fighting.
Yeah.
And a fight show. We had to do it for the fight show. So all of us had, and Adam Cole, I think, as well. So we all end up getting COVID. We all had COVID, right? I didn't have any symptoms. Like, I didn't have any of the symptoms. I wouldn't have known I had COVID, but we had to do the quarantine. So I was one of the lucky ones that didn't have symptoms. Now, here was my philosophy at the time. It's like, I'm thinking, okay, there's all these people out there that are not getting symptoms, right? So I was thinking, all right, cool. What were they doing that other people weren't doing? So I was thinking, all right, I'm going to try to do what the healthy people that didn't have the symptoms were doing and avoid the other things that the people that didn't have symptoms. So I just started doing that. And lo and behold, I didn't have symptoms. Now, that could be accurate. That could be just good luck on my behalf that I just wasn't going to have the symptoms. Or I just did similar things to what other people were doing.
I didn't have symptoms when I got it. And
yeah.
It's funny because now when you do a COVID test, it also tests for a flu.
Yeah.
Like, it's the same test.
And what I really hate about the whole experience is if you have this conversation in public, like we are right now, you're going to get called a vaccinator, you're going to get called a conspiracy theory, you're going to get all these sort of things. But all you want to do is have this conversation, say, look, no medication is for, we shouldn't have the same medical protocols or whatever for everyone. Like, some people can't take certain things and whatever. Like, there was no regard for that. There was no compassion or care. And it became this whole, everyone has to comply.
It was some people, if they fucking smell a peanut, they're going to die. You don't get rid of them from the shops.
Like, no, that's exactly. Right. Well, not yet anyway, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because something always happens. It's fucking crazy. And now a lot of people now with this war in the Middle East are just putting on their hats and they're like, oh, it's the election next month. What timing?
Yeah,
and it's like, but I imagine there's a lot more to it than that.
I think there is more to it. It's one of those.
It's been going on for fucking a long time.
Yeah,
and it's just boiled over.
And it's one of those things where people want to reduce it to, once again, to goodies versus baddies, but also like, it's not just Jew versus Muslim, because there's a lot of, in Palestine, for example, there's a lot of Christians and that. There's a lot of people there.
Do you want to answer that? I can pause.
No, it's all good. I have my notifications off, but say when my dad and my mum rings, it goes through. So my dad probably wants to talk about, I saw a really nice ass. Like, well, no, so no. But anyway, there's this sort of this assumption that there's good versus evil, right? So that history began on 7th of October 2023, right? And that wasn't a reaction to RDF actions in the West Bank or in Gaza, that there wasn't a heap of Palestinian civilians being killed all through 2023 up until that point. Now, that doesn't justify what Hamas did, right? That doesn't justify, breaking out of what some would call an open-air prison and then attacking civilians and doing what they did and taking hostages. That doesn't justify that, but that's a reaction, right? But then the reaction we're told that's justifiable is to completely obliterate, starve, and destroy innocent civilians' lives. And then we're told, okay, well, that's because Hamas is using human shields, right? Well, you know where Keswick Barracks is?
No.
Okay, so it's a military base here in South Australia, in Adelaide, right, near the city, right? So if the Chinese...
Keswick Barracks, yes. Yes.
So if they attack that and they happen to kill people on the outside, in the suburbs and all that, they could say, well, you're using human shields because you've got your military base in a suburb, right? But it's just expedience because you're dealing with an densely urban area, and yet we're told that every time there's a civilian death, it's the fault of the terror group or the government of Gaza, Hamas, that they're responsible for it. But these attacks are blanket attacks. They're mass attacks. They're not just singular attacks. They're not strategic attacks. They're not surgical attacks. They're very, very, very widespread. But then we've got snipers that are shooting women and children. We can see that. Then we've got IDF soldiers that are letting dogs rip apart a Down syndrome man. We can watch that,
And this is on the Israeli side.
This is IDF, Israel Defense Force, doing this to civilians, right? They happen to be Palestinians. Now, then we have the Hannibal Doctrine, right? Which is where there were incidences where Israeli tanks were shooting into buildings where Israeli hostages were with the Palestinians. So the Hannibal Doctrine is where we'll kill our own hostages so that they can't bargain with anything. So they're intentionally killing their own civilians. And at that music festival, they were leaving and then they were shooting and killing. Now, people will say that these are Hamas talking points, right? Well, these are independent talking points for people that are not coloured by pro-Israel or pro-Hamas, because Hamas have done bad things too, like same with Hezbollah in Lebanon, right? None of these people are good, right? I'm an anarchist. I don't like any government or any force, mandated hierarchy. But these people are reacting. These governments are acting. These organisations are acting as a response. And what's happening now is we're seeing that Israel has carte blanche, where it's going to war with 5 or 6 different nations. It's attacked Iran. It's assassinated people that it was negotiating with in Lebanon. It's invaded Lebanon. It's attacked Syria. It's been attacking Syria almost non-stop since 2014. It's attacked Yemen because the Houthis were fighting and doing their thing. It's attacking all these. It's attacking Iraq, okay? And so all of this region, and people say, well, it's because they're surrounded by enemies. Well, no, they're not surrounded by enemies because Jordan is pretty pro-Israel, and Lebanon was for at the time. Egypt is pro-Lebanon. They bribe those governments. They bribe the Egyptians, and Saudi Arabia is making, branches. And some of the Gulf states are sort of becoming soft on Israel. So it's a little bit more complicated than that. But the conflict has been going on at least since 1948, since the State of Israel occurred. But it's not black and white to say that all Palestinians are evil or that they're Muslims.
For a person, see, I don't follow conflict because I find when I follow conflict, it consumes me to a point where I get crippled by it because I get fear.
Yeah.
Because if I start reading into this now, I'll fucking go into a hole for hours and I'll make myself scared of a world war.
Yeah.
What is, for people who don't, because there's heaps of people who don't follow this shit.
Yeah.
What is the start of this? Is it because Palestine became its own state and took the land from Israel?
Israel didn't exist until 1948. It was a Palestinian mandated territories. So a lot of European Jews left Europe because of the Second World War, and they wanted to start up their own independent state. So they did. So they left Europe and they went to Palestine, which was a British mandated territory at the time. And then the state was recognized by, the big powers, essentially. After the Jews had terrorist organizations like the Irgun, the Haganah and stuff like that. So they committed a lot of terrorism as well against the British and that. And then what happened is they forged a state in Palestine and parts of Jordan and stuff like that. And then they pushed out. There was an exodus of about 800,000 Palestinians, and they pushed them out of the territories. And then Israel and Palestine was sort of this complicated area. So a lot of Palestinians went to places like Jordan and Egypt and things like that. And then in 1956, there was the war in 1948, which is the Israeli independence war sort of thing, where they fought the Transjordan forces and Arab forces. And then in 1956, there was sort of like a Sinai crisis, which is where Britain and France went to war against Egypt, Nasser of Egypt, who wanted to nationalize the Suez Canal and Egyptian oil. And then Israelis invaded as well, and that was sort of a pseudo-conflict in that region. And then there's a lot of little skirmishes, and then there's a lot of organizations that were starting up, like the Palestinian Liberation Organization and things like that. And then Israeli settlers would start spreading out and proliferating. We basically think of settler colonialism, which is what started Australia, the United States, and all that, where the native populace is being displaced and they're being replaced by the new people, which is the Jews from different parts of Europe, like say Russian Jews and Jews from America and Jews from Europe, and then. So they're not all just organic to that region, right? And then in 1967, there was the Six-Day War, which is where the Israelis military absolutely annihilated their Arab allies, and then they conquered huge parts. So they conquered much of Egypt, so like the Sinai Desert, all the way down to the Suez Canal. And then they also conquered parts of the Golan Heights and all these other parts and parts of Palestine, but the Palestinians stayed there, so it became occupied zone. And then there was negotiations to say that, we should go back to the 1967 borders. So if you hear that when you're listening to this sort of thing, they say we should go back to the pre-1967 borders, which is where the borders before Israel had won the Six-Day War. Then in 1973, there was the Yom Kippur. There was a lot of little wars of attrition between Egypt and Israel, for example. And that. Then in 1973, there was the Yom Kippur War, which is where all these Arab countries like Syria, not Jordan, Jordan was sort of neutral at that time, but Syria and Egypt, and they attacked Israel during the Yom Kippur holidays. And the Egyptians managed to cross the Suez Canal and push up through the Sinai Desert. And then the Syrians started retaking the Golan Heights and things like that. Israelis were pushed back, and the Israelis kicked ass, and then they took back land and all that. So that war was a really big one. So after that war, a lot of the Palestinians were displaced into Jordan, and so you had a lot of Palestinian terrorists, like under Yasser Arafat. You might have heard of him.
Yeah.
So you had a lot of these guys, and these were secular. So they were specifically non-religious terrorists, essentially. Okay. And so they were like communists, they were like Christians, atheists, Muslims, whatever. But they were fighting for a free Palestine. And so Israel started supporting Islamic extremists to counteract the Fatah party, which is the PLO. the secularists, because there's more credibility if you're fighting a religious fundamentalist group, right? So that was also happening in the background. And then so basically after 1973 through to 1978, Israel became friends with Egypt because you had Sadat, who was the Egyptian president. He made a deal, that was 77, sorry, he made a deal with Israel, made this peaceful thing. Part of the conditions was that Israel and the Americans were going to constantly bribe Egypt not to attack them. So they became a sort of a friend. Then at this time, there was a civil war going on in Lebanon. And in 1976 that started. And then Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982 because a lot of the Palestinian terrorists, the PLO, the Liberation Organization, was now in Lebanon. But then there's all these different factions. So you had like the South Lebanese Army, you had pro-Syrian factions. It's a really ugly civil war. Like, have you seen the movie Navy SEALs, for example?
No.
Awesome movie, you should watch it. It features in Lebanon at the end, and you can see just the different factions fighting. Anyway, so Israel invades. Both sides commit terrible atrocities, absolutely horrible atrocities. The Americans are also there. The Americans are forces, and there's a massive bombing, the Marine barracks, which kill a heap of French and American soldiers, like 800 or so. And apparently it's a pro-Iranian group that did it. And so the Americans end up leaving. Israel sort of takes over, and their allies is the South Lebanese Army. And then that civil war goes on until like 1999, essentially. And then Israel leaves Lebanon, and that gets reinvaded in 2006 in a horrible war where Hezbollah sort of kicks the Israelis' ass and kicks them out. And then now we've got what we're happening now in the Lebanon. But going back to Palestine, there was all these little agreements that were made, which is like there'll be like independent Palestinian territories, like which is run by either Hamas. So Hamas was elected in Gaza back in 2006. It's the only election that they had. And then the Fatah Party, which is the PLO, which is in the West Bank, they control there. So these Palestinian authorities are sort of like dependent on Israel, but they're the governing authorities. So Israel, they sort of collect taxes and they provide services, but they rely on Israeli food and electricity and all that because they're like in an embargo environment, because the Israelis are kind of occupying the region on the outside. And so it's a really complicated and convoluted thing, but you add into that, you have all these settlers that are coming from America and places like that, and they're coming in and they're pushing the Palestinians out of their homes, and they're pushing into the land, and they're creating like their own little suburbs essentially, and the Israeli military is their benefactor, is providing that support for them. And then you have random terror attacks. I mean, Hezbollah hasn't done a suicide bombing since 99, I think about 99. But they see them as a legitimate authority, but a lot of people see them as a terrorist organizations too, right? The Hamas people see them as a terrorist authority, but they're also a civil government.
What a fucking crazy place to be born.
It is a crazy place to be born,
just to be born.
Well, the average, most people in Palestine, right, in Gaza, are under the age of 18. Like, it's one of the youngest demographics in the world. Like, so it's full of young people. So most of the dead, I think it's 120,000. I think it was 118 to 120,000 confirmed dead from independent sources. Civilians that have been killed by Israel since 2023, since October 7th, 2023. So imagine a city as small as Adelaide, maybe smaller, with a population about the same size, completely surrounded, bombarded and attacked, starved and controlled.
Full of 18-year-olds.
Well, full of most of them younger than 18, yeah.
It's just fucking, it would be such a different upbringing. It's just so conflict-driven, that side of the world. But not on their...
So are we, though. I mean, is there a war that Australia hasn't invited itself to?
We just tag along.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, but... I mean, the thing is, like...
It just never happens on our soil.
Yeah, that's right. But except for Darwin in 42, but still... or one could argue the Emu Wars, when we lost against the Emus in the 1920s.
No.
So...
That's a thing.
That's a thing.
That's a thing.
Australia went to war against one of its national emblems, yeah.
No shit.
And we lost.
We lost. Yeah, we're a defence force. We're not an army.
Basically, what happened is... emus were doing their thing, and then it was upsetting a lot of farmers, and the ex-Australian military veterans were from World War I were enlisted to try to eradicate and wipe out the emus and set up machine gun lines and stuff like that. And emus still proliferated.
Still there.
Yeah, I know.
Do you think that this will be the tipping point, or do you reckon it'll just resume on another 100 years?
Okay, so that's a good question, because here's the thing, right? So Iran's involved. So Israel has attacked Iran.
Which is that's why everyone's shitting themselves now.
Yeah, but the Iranian response is really interesting, right? So Israel attacks Iran, assassinates a lot of people, and does what it does. Kind of gets away with it because it's got America to back it. So that's the big factor, right? The Iranian attack where they fired all those missiles and that, there was one civilian that was killed, right? And it was killed by debris. So it really sucks that human being died. But the intention was very selective targeting military infrastructure and things like that. So the Iranians showed that they could target these things and they could preserve life. Whereas we're not seeing that. We're not seeing that from, say, the Israeli side where they're just doing a lot of mass attacks. I mean, in 2006, they're dropping cluster bombs on Beirut. Like, they're dropping really heavy, they're dropping white phosphorus, and white phosphorus is a nasty thing. It's like it basically keeps igniting. So the more air, if you put water on it, keeps burning you. You got to suffocate it, and it's a horrible, horrible thing. And they were doing that into civilian areas and all that because just out of, whatever malice, essentially. So this would be considered a war that's saving Benjamin Netanyahu, because before this conflict, he was in a lot of political strife and a lot of political instability. The longer this war goes on, the better his regime is. It's not that simple. There's also other things, but there's a background factor. Israel is basically balls to the wall. The Israeli government is balls to the wall trying to push this war. There's a lot of criticism within Israel from the Hebrew press, not the English press, but the Hebrew press, so the press that's read by Israelis. There's a lot of criticism of Netanyahu's government and the war itself. So there is anti-war sentiment that's definitely being driven inside of Israel. A lot of people in the Jewish community across the world are also very anti this war because this is considered a Zionist thing, not a Jewish thing, a Zionist thing, which is like a sort of a religious fundamentalist government sort of thing. If Iran is invaded or attacked, that's going to be a very tough war because then it might bring in Russia and it might bring in other players in the region. America doesn't have control of its ally, and it never really has. You've also got the war in the Ukraine between Russia and the Ukrainians, which was a big thing up until what we're seeing in the Middle East. And that war is scary because there's no conversation between the Americans and the Russians. And that's frightening. So it's like, there was a lot of things that provoked that conflict. And there's a good book that's been written by Scott Horton from the Libertarian Institute, which talks about this conflict, that goes back to the origins of why this war happened. It doesn't justify the Russians invading Ukraine, right? But it's not as simple and clear cut as to why this provocation occurred. And it's just like October 7th didn't just occur out of thin air. It was a reaction. It doesn't justify what Hamas did. They still killed innocent civilians. It's just like 9/11, September 20, 2001, September 11, 2001. That didn't come from nowhere. That was a reaction, but it doesn't justify the reaction, if you know what I mean. But so we're living in a world of action, reaction, where it repeats on and so on and so forth. So whether the world is going to approach to nuclear conflict, we don't know. I don't think so. Hopefully, I think ironically, the baddie countries, North Korea, the People's Republic of China, the Theocratic Republic of Iran, and Putin's Russia, I think there are more rational players inside of those regimes. The irrationally is coming from the supposed liberal democracies, which is like, look at America. Like, they're pretty aggressive militarily. They love war. Australia, well, we just at least said tag along. Israel is really trying to expand its territory, and it's really going all out. It's not fighting a war of defense, it's fighting a war of settler colonial imperialism. So basically what happened to the Aboriginals and Native Americans is what's happening to the Palestinians. And then you've got people, you've got, say, Saudi Arabia, for example, which is full of Wahhabis and other people that are sentimental towards Palestine and the Palestinian situation. But the government, the ruling theocracy, is not. Same with Egypt, right? A lot of the people are sentimental and support Free Palestine, are very anti-Israel and very anti-Zionism, but the government's not, because they've been bribed. So you can have an overthrowing in that region, which can destabilize things. I don't think Israel can succeed without American support. And I'm not talking about political support and Joe Biden licking an arse and go. I'm talking about like
boots on the ground.
Well, more weapons and stuff like that, right? For example, using the Ukrainian war, that's a war of attrition, right? So the Russians are using Soviet era equipment, right? Because they had so much stockpiled. They're also buying in a shit ton from North Korea and the People's Republic of China because they've just got so much shit stockpiled. And they're just defeating and wearing down the Ukrainians with the munitions, like the artillery shells and the bullets and things like that. The Americans cannot produce enough 155 millimeter shells, artillery shells, right? They can't produce enough for what the Ukrainians need. NATO is expended, right? So war is expensive. There's a lot of fuel that goes into it, a lot of ammunition that goes into it. That war is going to peter out essentially, hopefully. And the unfortunate thing is negotiations between the Ukrainians and the Russians often get stopped by NATO and the United States because they want to keep it on. They want to keep that war going because it fucks up the Russians, right? But now that we've got this conflict happening with the Israelis in the Middle East, that means Ukrainian now doesn't get that support because all that stuff is going to Israel. Now, this precedent has occurred in the past. In 1972, for example, and 1973, when Vietnam was at war, the Americans had started a policy called the Vietnamization, which is where the American military, Australia, for example, as well, we left Vietnam as an active combat participant in 72. And then by 1973, it was up to the Vietnamese, the South Vietnamese, the Armed Republic of Vietnam, to defend against the North Vietnamese, right? And the Americans are going to provide air support, logistics support, and munitions, but the ARVN, the Armed Republic of Vietnam, the South Vietnamese forces, were going to fight that war on their own, right? Then the Yom Kippur War occurs, and then there's a massive offensive in North Vietnam. So all of this munitions and weaponry that was supposed to go to South Vietnam was circumvented and went to Israel instead and supplied the Israelis. So then the South Vietnamese were unable to stop the offensive of the North Vietnamese, and they kind of ran out of supplies and crucial things, lubricant and ball bearings and fuel and food, all these little things that people don't think about when they're playing, war games, computer games. These are the things that win wars and lose wars, right? That all went to Israel so that Israelis could defend themselves against the Arab invaders in 73. Now we're seeing that now. So a lot of the stuff that that was supposed to go to, according to the American policy, going to Ukraine is sort of going to Israel instead now. And every time Kamala Harris or Biden says, bad Israel, there's still arms supplies and shipments going there. There's still billions of weapons and stuff like that still going there. So they're feeding that army. There could be a ceasefire. Every time there's been a ceasefire, the people that were negotiating the ceasefire, Nasrallah and stuff like that, they get assassinated, right? So we're living in that world where there's no rational logic coming from one side. That doesn't justify Hamas, that does not justify Hezbollah, that does not justify terrorism, but those people are fighting a war of resistance, okay? And that's an ugly thing. I think if people want to come at this, if people want to say, but who's the goodies, Kym? Who's the good guys? This is the simple thing. And this is a quote, the late, great Robert Fisk: be on the side of the innocent. Be on the side of the innocent. Because in the real world, if someone murders your child, that child was still murdered. You know what I mean? That's the innocent person. That's the one that we should care about the most.
And that's how you breed hate. That's how these wars keep going.
Collectivism.
Because so I know if I had a child and fucking Hamas fucking bombed my house and my child died, I would instantly forever want them to burn.
But here's the thing. But we reduce that if Jocko McArsnugget from Modbury North, he comes down and he murders your child. Do you kill Jocko McArsnugget or do you destroy Modbury North? Mm. So when it comes to an intimate domestic sense, we understand that we should go after the murderers. Okay, we understand them as individuals. But when it comes to politics and things like that and governance, we go, all of them. Yeah, you have grown adults. You have people that will tell you, I'm a rational human being. They brought it on themselves. They'll be looking at a 6-year-old child that's limp body is just falling to pieces, and they'll say, she brought it on herself. You know what I mean? Why? Because she was born in Palestine? You know what I mean? Well, they voted for them. Okay, so that rationalizes it. That same rationale is what Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda used when they attacked the United States, because it's a democracy, right? Because the people voted for the president, they voted for their policymakers, so therefore if they voted for it, that means they're endorsing it. Does that mean we're all subject because the Australian government did something? We should all die? We should all be tortured? That rationale is absolutely absurd, but when it comes to statism or government rationales or collectivism, that's how people think. That's no different to say a guy whose missus cheats on him and says, fucking all women, mate, they're all fucking the same, eh? That guy is a misogynist, right? And it's the same thing as a chick that goes because she was abused by her husband and fucking all men can't be trusted, you know? That we understand that to be stupid. But when it comes to war, for some reason we believe that is legitimate. That we can look at a child and think that child deserves to be absolutely punished because a government that has nothing to do with that child other than geographical nearness and that child happens to belong to the tax base that's forced upon it. Most of these people suffer. Like someone in North Korea, for example, right now, they're suffering beneath that government. To punish them because of the actions of the government is perverse. All right, most people, most Australians are sort of apolitical. They like their understanding of government is there's a belief that it provides services. You know, it has a monopoly on all these things, so it provides these services and it protects them and all that, all this sort of stuff. But that government sees them as a subject, right? It sees them as someone that they rule. So because that government, you know, Peter Dutton does something or Albanese does something, right? Does that mean that 16 little girls in a kindergarten or 16 little boys and girls in a kindergarten should be blown to pieces? Like, when that's close to home, that's fucking retarded. That's just disgusting. But when it's over there, and when it's an Australian fighter jet dropping bombs in Syria to fight ISIS and it happens to kill civilians, things happen in war. That's what happens, you know? What?
Do you think that the election next month will have an impact on it?
I think Harris is saying, like, look, to me, politics is absurd. It's like being an atheist and having to care about Lutherans versus Catholics or Islam versus Judah. So my inclination towards politics is as an atheist looking at other people's religions and understanding it from that perspective. So I think when it comes to the US political election, Kamala Harris is acknowledging that the Palestinians are suffering, but the Biden administration is basically following the Trump foreign policies, and she probably will be supporting the same policies that we've already seen. So supporting Israel at the expense of Hamas and the Palestinians and any peace negotiations. I think Donald Trump will probably be more inclined to support Israel. He's already said as much. So during the debates, it's like, well, if it was for you, Israel would not exist. Like their talking points is Israel is whatever. I think if Donald Trump was president at the time, I don't think we would have had a war in the Ukraine versus Russia now. I think there would have been negotiations and compromises, and that's not because of the whole Russiagate bullshit. That's just because that's something that would have probably happened there. I think that relations between North Korea might be a little bit better, you know. Relations between China and Taiwan might be maybe a little bit better because he likes business and making money. That being said, Donald Trump is still an irrational actor. He is surrounded by the Shuttle Adelson crew, which is like there's a lot of so AIPAC is this thing in America where you can buy interests, right? And it happens to be an Israeli lobby. There's a Taiwan lobby. There's a Saudi lobby. So all of these interest groups have lobbies, right? And AIPAC has a really big one. So basically, there's a lot of that surrounding former President Trump. I think there's also a lot of that surrounding the Democrats. I think whatever person is elected is going to be pro-Israel in pro-Israeli policies. I think the truth is going to come from Israel itself. If Netanyahu is removed from office, I think we might get a more moderate person that might start easing things back. But there are a lot of people in Israel that want this. There are a lot of people that wanted manifest destiny in the United States. There are a lot of people that wanted to obliterate their Aboriginals here in Australia. There are a lot of people in Germany that wanted a breathing room at the expense of the Slavs and, you know, the people in Russia and stuff. So you've got a lot of people that want that. And so that reality is very frightening. And that's what I think looking at it. But we don't know, you know.
Well, I'm going to stick to watching fights and not knowing much about much. But I will let you go now. That was a great chat. We will do it again
that'd be
eventually.
Good. That'd be good.
But thank you for coming on, Kym.
No, thank you, bro.
Have a good one, man.
Awesome. Thanks, mate.